Welcome to the IDP Plus Advice Show for Week 16. Today we're going to look back at Week 15 IDP snap counts, defensive player alignments, positioning, injuries, waiver impacts as a result, etc. Glad to have everyone with us again today. Hopefully that means you are advancing in your playoffs. But even if you aren't, you can learn a lot by joining our show. I am your host, Ricky Rodriguez. You can find me at RickyRod66 on X. I am joined by the IDP talented savant, Shawn Teague, who you can find on X at Shawn8386. We're thrilled to be here with you. We're recording this on Tuesday night, December 16th, to recap that Week 15 and to talk about Week 16 and beyond. Shawn, man, second week of the playoffs. I know you've had some pretty good luck. You want to share with the listeners real quick why you're part of this show, man?
Yeah, 12 teams made the playoffs for me, and 9 are still alive. Every IDP only league I was in made the playoffs, so that's always nice. That's a little bit of validation there for me, I guess. But
That's why you should probably listen to him a little bit more than you'll listen to me from time to time. Shoot.
don't bench your studs.
Get your studs. Yes. We may come up. That may come up during the show. As always, you have comments, questions, etc., suggestions. Put them on the YouTube channel. Shawn and I are periodically answering those, and appreciate a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. All right, Shawn, let's go ahead and jump in. And we're going to start with the AFC East as we always do, and we're going to start with the Buffalo Bills, who only played 52 snaps against the Patriots this week after only 60 the week before. On average, it's about 65 snaps, but what you can see as the wintertime picks up, you have more of these cold winter games, that 65 is going to become closer to 62, 63 on average in terms of number of snaps per team per game. Joey Bosa returned, had a healthy 75% of snaps. Terrell Bernard was out again. Shaq Thompson wore the green dot at 98%. A good chance that Terrell Bernard does return this week. Matt Milano had his biggest and best game of the season on 87% of the snaps. Shawn, do we consider this one an outlier or a something we're going to bank on for Matt Milano?
Oh no, we are not banking on that. That was cool. It happened. I'm sure he was on the waivers or on everybody's bench when it happened.
Exactly right. If you did have him in your lineup, put it on the YouTube channel. We'd like to hear about that and why.
Yeah. How bad were things that you were down to Matt Milano?
Exactly right. Cole Bishop was at 100%. Jordan Poyer continued to have a rotation. He was at 77%. Cam Lewis was at 23%. So previously it was a Jordan Hancock, Jordan Poyer, but they flipped it and went with Cam Lewis there. Hancock did get a handful of snaps, though. Teron Johnson continued to be the slot corner, playing 79% of the snaps with 85% of those in the slot. That doesn't even include the boxing on the D-line. So that takes care of your Buffalo Bills. Shawn, we're going to move to the Miami Dolphins next, who played on Monday Night Football. And I did that as a prompt to remind Shawn, and I know he's doing it anyway, to grab the timestamps for us. The Dolphins played 66 snaps versus the Steelers on Monday Night Football in one of the most confusing coaching games I've ever seen. I was right there with Troy Aikman. You know, they're taking forever to huddle, and then they're calling timeouts in the 2-minute drill, Shawn. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's tough times to be a Dolphins fan. I'm expecting a whole new coaching staff, possibly a new quarterback next year, and another stout group of IDP performers for next year during these changes.
Exactly. And Shawn is a big Dolphins fan, so that's why I teed that up for him so nicely. Bradley Chubb and 85% of the snaps, Chop Robinson up to 62%, Matt Judon down in the mid-30s, and riffraff after that. I'm sorry, just another guys after that. They're still professional football players, which I am not. But Chop Robinson bumping up is nice, and boy, he had one really nice hit last night. Zach Sealer, for the second game in a row, had a sack. Of course, he had 2 sacks the previous game. He was up to 71%. Shawn, for those in defensive tackle required leagues, after 2 weeks of this, as a number 2 defense tackle, would you play Zach Sealer?
I'm a little more open to starting him, but it's going to depend on my other options. If he's my DT2, then yeah, I'm okay with that. But if he's my lone starter, I'm still nervous.
All right, there you go, folks. Tyrell Dodson at 100%. Jordan Brooks played 94%. Shawn and I were actually DMing during the game last night. Shawn noticed Jordan Brooks trying to put weight on his ankle and then shaking his head no, and so we were quite worried. Then all of a sudden, he ended up back in the game. So we will be watching injury reports. Hopefully, with as good as he's been for so many teams this year, he's in there. But just something to keep an eye on. Willie Gay was the linebacker that took his spot. Now, when Tyrell Dodson had the concussion and was out earlier this year, KJ Britt played his spot. So if Brooks is out, we would expect Gay. If something were to happen to Dodson later in the year, it would be Britt. So just keep that in mind, folks. Now, because he came back in the game, I didn't even put Willie Gay on the waiver list that we'll talk about a little bit later. So just as an FYI. Minkah Fitzpatrick left the game with an injury in Q4 in the fourth quarter after 89% of the snaps, with 54% of them in the slot and only 17% deep. Once again, great utilization. Sounds like it's a calf injury. Today it came out that he is week to week. What really shows you something, of course, Fitzpatrick was traded from the Steelers to the Dolphins. When he was hurt down on the field, all the Steelers players that came onto the field, along with the Dolphins players, there was so much concern. It says a lot about Minkah. But this isn't a social website or whatever. This is our social show. This is about IDP and playing time. Ashton Davis started next to him, played almost all the snaps. Ifeatu Melifonwu came in as the replacement for Minkah Fitzpatrick and was the fifth DB, and then Dante Trader sort of became into the Melifonwu role when Melifonwu moved into the Fitzpatrick role. If Mink is out, which it sounds like he will be, Shawn, because he's week to week, how good do you feel about Melifonwu right now?
Not great. Not great. We've seen this a while back where it was Trader, Belafonte, Davis, all kind of getting time. If I'm taking a shot on anybody, it's probably Davis, but I'm really looking somewhere else.
Yeah, staying away from these Dolphin safeties unless we're desperate. I'm right there with you. So that's the thing on the Dolphins. The only other thing I'll mention, though, Jason Marshall got, I believe it was one snap, and he played it in the slot. I have a feeling that if Fitzpatrick is out as we expect, that Davis and Melifonwu will play the safety spots. Neither one would take over that slot role that Minkah had. And I think Jason Marshall, who played the slot role a little bit earlier this year, will come back onto the field and play that role. He missed time with injury and so forth. So that's how I think it's going to play out. Shawn, we'll move to the Patriots next, who played 70 snaps against the Bills in quite the Jekyll and Hyde game for the Bills. But they ended up on top after that really slow start. Last week on the show, I was actually looking back at my notes from last week. We cautioned everyone about the fact that, Robert Spillane had only played 70% of the snaps. They were coming out of that bye, something we need to keep an eye on. But no one, neither one of us included, expected him to only be an emergency linebacker. I was surfing the internet, a lot of the IDP brethren. No one had put anything out about that. No one kind of knew. Shawn, Jack Gibbons played 100% wore the green dot. Christian Ellis, he was up to 86% with that kind of utilization. We probably could play him as well. But if Spillane is on the report as limited on Friday of this coming week, are you playing him on Sunday?
Man, that's such a gamble. I think you're better off having Gibbons as just a handcuff for Spillane at best, and then you're probably still not going to know until kickoff if he's in or out. So it's tough, man. It's a really tough spot to be in. I'm actually in that spot, so probably best to look somewhere else, honestly.
And Spillane, in terms of production this year, he's been up and down quite a bit. And so sometimes it's like you sit him potentially, if depending on your, and then he goes off and you play him and he doesn't. There's been a little bit of that as well. So if you have other options, you may want to consider other options than Robert Spillane. What's interesting, and Shawn and I also DM'd about this as well, the Patriots signed Chad Muma off of the Colts practice squad. And so that seems to indicate that they may need more linebacker depth, which might indicate that they're concerned about Spillane. Just another data point. Sometimes you have to, it's not what the teams say, but what they do. And that really has me even more concerned about Spillane. Kayvon Chason played 70% of the snaps because there wasn't really much in the box score. I wanted to double check that. So for those y'all in deeper leagues, he did play a lot, play what he usually plays. It didn't come through for us against the Bills. At safety, Craig Woodson was down to 87%. There was nothing in the injury report about Woodson that I saw that he left the game early. So we'll watch the injury reports this week. It just could be for whatever reason he played a little bit less and don't know why. So just be careful on Craig Woodson. Marcus Jones continues to be the slot cornerback. For those of y'all in deep cornerback leagues, Carlton Davis left the game with an injury. His replacement was Charles Woods. I thought I saw him come back in the game, but I didn't get a chance to 100% verify that. Part of the challenge of getting this out on Tuesday night for you all is not always being able to dot every I and cross every T. So if you're trusting Carlton Davis, be really careful about that. All right, let's move to the New York Jets with 62 snaps versus the Jaguars in what was a very embarrassing performance. Defensive coordinator Steve Wilks was relieved of his duties, which is such a nice way of saying his ass was fired. Now, the thing about this is, Shawn, that I worry about, you have an interim defensive coordinator. You would expect that he wants to do things a little bit different. That's probably the mandate from the coach to figure out something different because what the previous coordinator wasn't doing was working. How does that have you feeling, particularly about Quincy Williams, who I read some PFF numbers, how he got absolutely torched, in particular in the passing game? Or do you have any concern about Quincy Williams, the safety alignment, where we're seeing those safeties like Malachi Moore, Tony Adams, et cetera, playing close to line of scrimmage and not a lot of deep alignment? Do you have concerns with this interim head coach change, or are you saying, Ricky, you're overthinking it?
Yeah, probably to some degree, we might see some other guys rotate in, but honestly, their depth is trash right now. They've lost a lot of starters. They traded guys away, so there's not a whole lot they can change, honestly. And the reason those guys are playing so close to the line is because these teams are jumping on them and then just rushing the ball. There's short passes just to chew the clock up, so they get to play closer and get us more tackles. There's no fixing this defense this late in the season. They just don't have the pieces.
And so in terms of that would be very concerning, though, about how much you trust. But it sure looked like they mailed it in. And, of course, Tony Adams once again got hurt. So the safeties for the Jets outside of Tony Adams, obviously, Malachi Moore, but they signed Keydron Smith from I forgot whose practice squad, Dean Clark, an undrafted free agent, Jarius Monroe, another undrafted free agent, just got signed from their practice squad to the active roster today. Their starting cornerbacks are Brandon Stevens, Quantez Stiggers, and Jordan Clark. Boy, that's
what I'm saying. There's nothing on this team to really try. So I'm not too concerned about Williams unless they just go with nothing but defensive backs out of frustration with Sherwood and Williams.
And the problem is with Malago was hurt.
Malago was out. McCrary Ball's gone.
On IR. So if Malagoa is active, I would be very concerned about Quincy Williams. That's just Ricky's opinion, folks. If he's not, then I think you're safe with Quincy Williams because I don't think they're going to go to Mykal Walker or Cam Jones or Kobe King in place of Quincy Williams, even if Quincy Williams is a free agent coming up at the end of the year. On the defensive line, Jermaine Johnson jumped all the way up to I messed up.
83%.
He actually fell. Let me rephrase that. He went from 83. Take three. The week before, he had jumped up to 83%. This past week, he was all the way down to 44%. Will McDonald jumped all the way up to 86%. Michael Clemens jumped up from the low 50s, high 40s, up to 63%. It looks like Jermaine Johnson got a little bit of a benching. There was no word of any injuries on him as well. But once again, even though I'm going through all this stuff, other than Jamie Sherwood and Malachi Moore, is there anybody else you really are rushing to play for the Jets?
Not now with the uncertainty of Tony Adams and then Isaiah Oliver getting hurt. He's on IR. He's gone. He was a very productive body, I guess, in the secondary there. There's so many unknowns. It's Sherwood and Malachi. That's the only two I'm starting.
Yeah, and that's a great call out. I forgot to mention about Isaiah Oliver because when Adams got hurt after 40% of the snaps, Isaiah Oliver came in and played 10% of the snaps. He got hurt, and then that's when Dean Clark, then drafted free agent, came in. I'm not betting my fantasy playoffs on Dean Clark, folks. All right, let's move to the AFC North. Let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens, who only played 41 snaps on offense. We'll talk about that when we get to the Bengals. But on defense, they ended up playing 76 snaps in what was a blowout game at the end. Big news here, Teddy Buchanan, after 16% of the snaps, tore his ACL, out for the year. Trenton Simpson came in and picked up the snaps and played 46% of them. Of course, with Buchanan 16, that gets you into that 62 range. Shawn, if you have Teddy Buchanan and you're playing him and you can grab Trenton Simpson off of waivers, are you slotting Simpson right into that Buchanan role?
Probably, because that probably means it's a deeper league, and you're going to have somebody in there. I think he'll do enough to get you some tackles to not give you just goose eggs or anything, but it's not great, especially with the alignments of Baltimore going with all these safeties and the return of Ardarius Washington. You know that could factor in as to maybe picking up some of those snaps as well. So it's not great, but if you're in a deep enough league, I'm probably going to take a shot on him.
Okay. But his tackle efficiency on a per snap basis has not been as good as Buchanan. So just as Shawn was said, you'll get some tackles, but don't expect Buchanan production if you put him in. On the edge, Tavius Robinson was activated from IR. Draymond Jones stated roughly 67%, which is where he was the week before. Mike Green, the second round rookie, all the way down from the mid 70s to 53%. He did still get a sack, though. Tavius Robinson also got a sack in his first game back, but only played 45% of the snaps. I do expect that to go up. Kyle Van Noy is at 43%. David Ojabo actually played 24%. Now, they played 76 snaps, which is getting near a game and a quarter almost kind of thing. So they probably had a little bit more rotation. But Shawn, Mike Green, Tavius Robinson, defensive ends, threes and deep leagues kind of thing, edge threes.
Yeah, deep league. I was using Tavius Robinson in some deep leagues earlier this year until he got hurt, went on IR. I might consider using him, but we're looking at edge three. Yeah, I'm not taking him higher than that.
Now, Kyle Van Noy, I got to give him a shout out. Older guy, 33, 34, back age, gets the turnover, and he's smart enough to say, I'm going to give it to the younger, smaller, fast guy who took it all the way for a touchdown.
Yeah, he knows if they score this touchdown, he's got to go right back to defense.
And my son texted me, who's playing against Aloy Gilman in a really deep salary cap league, so he was pissed because he got that touchdown. All right, Ardarius Washington was also activated from IR, and if you go back way back to the beginning of the year, before Ardarius Washington's big injury, he was going to be starting as safety next to Kyle Hamilton and so forth. So with him being activated, was kind of concerned how things would play out. He played only 20% of the snaps this week, but he only played 27% deep, 73% close to line of scrimmage. Kyle Hamilton was at 100%. Aloy Gilman was at 100%. The thing with Gilman, though, is he went from being only 29% deep to 62% deep this past week. Malachi Starks, he was actually down from 65% to 51% in terms of how much he plays deep. So that's how the safety thing played out. I think we saw a little bit more deep playing from Gilman and Starks. I mean, that's a bit of a decrease, but still, over 50% was deep because this was the Bengals and they kept things in front of it and in front of it. And that's why the Bengals didn't really have any big plays. I think they only had 2 plays, maybe 3 of greater than 10 yards is what I heard on the radio. And I think that's why the Ravens just kept them deep and said, you're going to have to dink and dunk up the field. And The Bengals kept on screwing up as they did it.
The big thing here was Chidobe Awuzie getting injured, so Marlon Humphrey, who was our slot guy, had to kick outside some. And I think that allowed Ardaris Washington to get on the field more and play that slot role, which, depending on Awuzie's injury, that might be the new norm. I know Humphrey got a little banged up as well, but I do think he came back in.
Yes, he did.
So my thing was Washington going to eat into Starks this week, and because of those other injuries, moving those guys around, we didn't see that happen. If it was going to happen at all, so Washington may be the new slot guy. Humphrey may be the outside guy. That's something we're going to kind of look out for. And this is a terrible time because Humphrey's been very productive, and if he kicks outside more, then we're going to lose a lot of those line of scrimmage tackles and stuff like that.
So as you got into folks, if Awuzie is out, stay away from Humphrey if you can because he'll play mostly outside.
It's definitely going to hurt him. We only seen him get a couple tackles this week, but I think the interception is what saved him. What's because Awuzie got hurt early, so Humphrey had to start picking up a lot of those on the outside.
Yeah, Awuzie only played 21% of the snaps, to your point. All right, let's move to the Bengals, Shawn, who, as I mentioned earlier, only played 41 snaps versus the Ravens. So for perspective, that's about 2.5 quarters of a game, barely. It's hard to have much production when you play 41 snaps when you should be averaging, let's call it 64, 65, somewhere around there. Now, Myles Murphy, as a result, played 93% of the snaps, and he did get 2 sacks on Lamar. Still not a stud necessarily, but he can be a volume-based producer. So keep that in mind on Myles Murphy. At the linebacker position, unfortunately, because Barrett Carter because the Bengals played so few snaps, even though Barrett Carter played 100% of the snaps, he didn't have nearly the production. Demetrius Knight, 73%, Oren Burks, 59%. I know Barrett Carter let me down in one of my big leagues because he just wasn't on the field enough, unfortunately. Geno Stone did go back to being 66% of his snaps deep after being only 39% deep. Jordan Battle was not nearly as deep as often. He was only 44% deep. So that kind of contributed to the game Battle had, including this nice interception. Jalen Davis continues to be the slot cornerback. He played only 42% of the snaps. That's because, as I think most people are aware, the Ravens use a lot of multi-tight end formations, which means that slot cornerback isn't going to be in the field as much. But Dax Hill, once again, only played 5% of the slot, and he gave us a big fat zero goose egg, and it's something we've been warning about on this show, Shawn, about Dax Hill and how the utilization has changed, and we just talked about it with Marlon Humphrey as well. It's a risk to that cornerback scoring when that happens.
Yeah, this was the big trend. We were heading to this for the last month or so now, it feels like, where his production was just tanking. He was getting saved by a few big plays here and there. And yeah, like you just said, this is potentially what could happen to Marlon Humphrey if his utilization is more outside corner instead of that slot role. Like I say, that's who we want in cornerback leagues, the slot guys that are playing a lot of snaps up near the line, getting those tackles for us.
All right. DJ Turner, last thing I'll mention, 78% of the snaps. He must have gotten hurt, though it wasn't reported because Josh Newton ended up playing 22% of the snaps. And DJ Turner's been having a fantastic year. We'll move to the Browns next. The Browns played 67 snaps versus the Bears. I hadn't done that all year, so I wanted to do it once, even though I'm not a Bears fan. Myles Garrett played 81% of the snaps. Alex Wright was up to 70%. Garrett now at 21.5 sacks, one short of the record. Mason Graham was at 69%. Carson Schlesinger, his usual 100%, 6 straight games with 10-plus tackles. From a dynasty perspective, he'll in redraft leagues next year as well. He'll be a top 5 pick for sure at the linebacker position. Devin Bush had a very disappointing outing, although he did play 87% of the snaps. Grant Delpit continues to creep higher and higher in terms of the percentage of snaps he's playing deep. He played 20% deep. Denzel Ward did not play due to an injury. Not much more to talk about on the Browns, Shawn, unless you got something to call out there, bud.
No, I had to double take on Devin Bush after I seen his very low production this week. He did play his 80% of the snaps or whatever. I thought maybe an injury had occurred because Diabate had so many tackles this week. I was like, oh no. And that just wasn't the case. Diabate was just highly efficient and Bush was not. So
Yep,
just a
exactly.
weird game.
It's an outlier for Bush. All right, the Steelers, who only played 50 snaps versus the Dolphins, and that's after playing 80 the week before against the Ravens and 74 the previous week against the Bills. Now, as we just talked about, on 50 snaps, it's hard to get IDB production. Let's start on with the edges first for the Steelers, where TJ Watt, most people know, got that collapsed lung from this needle therapy stuff. Not sure, based on the reports today, if he'll be back this week. What was interesting, we've said when Watt is out or when Alex Highsmith is out, you play Nick Herbig on the edge. Well, something very interesting happened. The Steelers have been gashed by running games, and so Jack Sawyer played 56% of the snaps at edge. Nick Herbig only played 52%. Ricky's speculation is that was more to stop the run, as because Herbig is a little bit lighter in the pants. At linebacker position, something similar happened. And Shawn, I want your opinion after this. Peyton Wilson only played 42% of snaps. Malik Harrison, 58%. Cole Holcomb, as an FYI, played 0%. Shawn, do you agree with my hypothesis that the reason Peyton Wilson didn't play as much was because they were concerned about this Dolphins running game, and as a result of that, they ended up playing these guys who are more stout against the run?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Malik Harrison is known as a downhill guy, run stopper, and then Sawyer too being bigger to kind of eat up those blows. But uh, it's still a bit surprising for Herbig. This was a tough matchup anyway. Dolphins just haven't been getting up a lot of points to defensive ends, and then for linebackers, again, not a great matchup because the Dolphins are averaging somewhere in the 50s on offensive snaps. So, not a great matchup. Queen did really well, uh, or decent enough, I guess. But yeah, if I have Wilson or Harrison or Holcomb, I'm probably not playing any of them at the playoffs, regardless of the matchup. Wilson, we've seen him be efficient with his tackles, get big plays, but we just see what happens when they shake it up to stop the run here. So I guess depending on the matchup, we could see this again if that's their
Shake it
focus.
up. Ooh, shake it up.
Well,
Sorry.
Ricky's on a roll tonight, guys.
That song, man, it just popped in my head when you talked about shaking it up. But I'm with you. I'm trying to stay away from these guys, and I'm not really feeling great about playing Herbig. The
No,
Steelers. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Shawn.
no, that really soured on me. Even though it was a bad matchup, I was expecting him to get some tackles in there.
And the
Just
Steelers play the Lions, who also have, if I remember correctly, have not been good against edges. So another reason, maybe not, or excuse me, the Lions have not been good about giving up a ton of points to edges, if I'm remembering correctly.
yeah, that's not a good matchup either because the Lions can hurt you in the passing game or rushing game. Um, Steelers are going to be busy this week. Going to be on defense a lot.
Kyle Duggar returned from injury, played 100% of the snaps next to Jalen Ramsey. James Pierre, the outside cornerback, was inactive due to injury. Asante Samuel Jr., who they recently signed, coming back from that cervical fusion neck surgery thing, which is crazy, but he came back and he played. And he even got an interception on 100% of the snaps across from Joey Porter. Brandon Echols was a slot cornerback, but the Dolphins, too, using Julian Hill, Darren Waller, Greg Dulcich, usually a lot of multi-tight end stuff, so he was only on the field for 34% of the snaps. We love those slot cornerbacks, but folks, it's got to be in the right matchup. All right, let's move to the AFC South, Shawn. Let's go to the Houston Texans, who played 66 snaps versus the Cardinals in what I would call a disappointing performance for their defense overall. Either that or Jacoby Brissett is the second coming of John Elway. All of a sudden, he drank the Kool-Aid or something, man. But Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson both played their typical snaps. Unfortunately, we thought they'd do more against the Cardinals, particularly with both of their starting tackles out, but it just didn't work out. That they had the big showing that we thought they would. At defensive tackle, you had Sheldon Rankins and Tommy Togiai. In deep defensive tackle leagues, they're both two folks to consider, but very, very deep leagues where you have to play defensive tackles, and if you're desperate. Tim Settle went to IR. Mario Edwards is joining him on IR. So they're going to get more and more playing time, and depending on the matchup. So this week, the Texans play the Raiders. The Raiders line sucks. If you're looking for maybe some sort of big splash defensive tackle, Rankins and Togiai could be your answer. At linebacker, EJ Speed was inactive due to injury, but regardless, Henry Toto played he played 100% of the snaps like he did previous week, so for 2 weeks in a row is what that means in English. Al-Shaair played his normal 100%. Christian Harris played the third linebacker role and played 50%, but once again, Toto played 100%. Shawn, you feel good about playing Toto in the playoffs based on these last 2 weeks, even if EJ Speed were to be active?
Yeah, if EJ Speed is active, he just knocks Christian Harris back down. He'll take over that 40, 50 range, 50% range as the third linebacker to stop the run, basically. Toa, I'm comfortable with him.
Okay. Now the one thing about the Raiders, the Texans as they play the Raiders this coming week, we've seen the Raiders offense suck so badly that the games have become blowouts.
That's true.
And these defensive players are not getting the snaps. So if they don't get something early, they might not get anything at all. So just a caution to as you're setting your lineups and depending as you're weighing options, if you think your player can get it early against the Raiders, great, because in the fourth quarter, most likely they will be sitting on the bench, or even if they're not, they're only going to play 41 snaps or 44 snaps or something like that, about 3/4 of a game on, and so that just keep that in mind, folks. Derek Stingley left the game with an injury. Tremon Smith was his primary replacement. But the number 5 defensive back was really Miles Bryant. But he only needed to play 41% of the snaps, and he played 93% of those snaps deep, which meant Jalen Petrie got to play close to the line of scrimmage, which we love for Jalen Petrie. We'll go to the Colts now, who only played 60 snaps versus the Seahawks, with Phillip Rivers actually helping with time of possession for the Colts offense with all his dinking and dunking, which led to the Colts defense not being on the field very much. Latu did creep up a little bit more in playing time than I thought, playing 71% of the snaps. Pay was also a tidbit higher than I expected at 60%, but Ebicon was at 45%. Tua Malowau was at 32%. Taekwon Lewis, 25%. DeForest Buckner, who had his 21-day window activated last week, was limited in practice all week, but he was not activated from IR, so he did not play. Hopeful that he will play this coming week for us. Shawn, if he is activated and playing defensive tackle required leagues, I don't know about you, but I'm playing DeForest Buckner.
Yeah, absolutely. You're playing DeForest Buckner. It's one of the best in the business, even at his age. The matchup is great. With full confidence. If they tell me he's active, I'm putting him in. And I'm moving on. He's set and forget.
Zaire Franklin, 100% of the snaps, got 10 tackles in total again this week. I believe that's 4 weeks in a row, if I remember correctly. Jermaine Pratt, 90% of the snaps. Jalen Carley's with a healthy scratch. Last week we talked about the fact that you could say bye-bye to him. That's just all the more reason if you wanted to hold out hope just in case. Well, he was a healthy and active, so you can let him go now. Okay, at cornerback, Kenny Moore only played 70% of the snaps once again with 83% in the slot. He is not playing outside corner at all, basically. So you can forget about Kenny Moore, folks. If you've been relying on him for all these years and it's hard to part ways with someone you've loved and is giving you all this cornerback production, but it's time to let him go. We've been talking about that since very early in the year. Let's move to the Jaguars next, Shawn. and they played 68 snaps versus the Jets in what was a freaking massive blowout. With that, surprisingly, though, Josh Hines Allen and Travon Walker played their normal amount of snaps roughly, but at linebacker position, Foye Oluokun only 77%, Devin Lloyd 69%. Both got removed out of the game because of the blowout. To that point, Oluokun, I believe, had played all the snaps, and Lloyd had played all but a handful of snaps. Now, it's the safety position. This is where it gets interesting. You may recall Andrew Wingard was out the week before with concussion when Eric Murray came back. So Eric Murray and Antonio Johnson started. Shawn and I were speculating last week that we thought it'd be Murray and Wingard and Antonio Johnson would go to the bench. But what happened was a bit of a rotation. And it was rotation in a blowout situation. But as we projected on here, Murray and Wingard are the two favorites in the primary. And the reason I feel comfortable saying that is that when it got to garbage time, Murray and Wingard were the two that came off the field. Johnson and Rayon Lane III, the rookie, I think he was a seventh rounder out of Army, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm really testing my memory banks there. They stayed on the field during garbage time. But Shawn, do you think this rotation is going to continue, particularly for those that have been playing Wingard and risk him only playing, 75, 80% of the snaps? Or you think this was a easing him back in from a concussion? Usually you don't ease back necessarily from a concussion. It's usually if it's a calf or a hammy or something. What do you think, Shawn?
Yeah, I think this was just such a blowout, and Johnson had actually been playing pretty decent, so they just gave him a little more time, little reward there. I actually expect all three of these guys to play, but Johnson to be down low, probably 20, 30%, something like that. I do expect to see him on the field a little bit, but when the competition isn't a blowout, I expect Murray and Wingard to be your main two guys out there.
All right. Now, no cornerback played more than 65% of the snaps. Part of that was because of the blowout. Part of that was because it felt like it was a little bit of a rotation as well, as some of the other guys were getting healthier again. So kind of risky if you've been trying to rely on a Greg Newsome or Jordan Lewis, who had such a great start of the year, but has just fallen off. Risky to trust any of those cornerbacks. Let's move to the Titans as we wrap up the AFC South. They played 74 snaps versus the 49ers. Jeffrey Simmons had a monster game, played 91% of the snaps, which is a lot when you play 74 snaps, which is more than an average game. And then they give him a freaking touchdown pass. Shawn, in the Kings Classic, I'm in the playoffs.
I'm aware.
And he gets a touchdown catch, which was basically a key part of the difference of me losing. That
Sealed
just
Ricky's fate.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Yep. Yeah.
congratulations to those of y'all that were playing Jeffrey Simmons on your team, that is. But if you were playing against him, it freaking sucked. Okay, I got that off my chest. Cody Barton played 100% of the snaps. Big news, though. Cedric Gray got a concussion in the fourth quarter. Luckily, he made it through that far and had a good game and played 87% of the snaps. James Williams, the third, who has defensive back eligibility, as a reminder, in certain platforms, he came in and played all the snaps in Gray's absence. Concussions, oftentimes not really good coming back in 1 week. If Cedric Gray doesn't play, are you putting James Williams in? One, if he's in a linebacker eligibility from a platform perspective. Two, if he's eligible as a defensive back from a platform perspective. Would you play him under those two scenarios, Shawn?
I will play him in both those scenarios based on the amount of snaps that the Titans continue to run each week on defense, how much they are on the field, and just how terribly inefficient Cody Barton is, which means he's not getting those tackles. So somebody else is. And I believe Williams had 3 or 4 of those right there at the end of the game. So I don't expect Cedric Gray numbers, but I do expect starting LB2 numbers, which we predicted way back in the offseason when it was still his job. and switched to Cedric Gray right before the start of the season. So yeah, I'm fully comfortable starting James Williams. I've seen him last year, what he was able to do. Expect a solid 6-7 tackles.
And the Titans are playing the Chiefs with Gardner, Mustache, Minshew. So,
That's Dink. That's Dunk. That's
yep,
somebody's got
exactly.
to run the clock out.
Now at the safety position, let's go to there because some interesting things happening here on Tuesday, December 16th with that. So I want a hooker. I mean, Amani Hooker played 100% of the snaps. See what I did there? Uh, I wonder if all our listening audience, they'll let me know on the YouTube channel with some smart aleck comments, I'm sure, about that. But Amani Hooker played 100% of the snaps. The reason he finally played 100% of the snaps, Kevin Winston Jr., who we prophesized about, we said, he's going to lead us to the promised land. Unfortunately, he pulls a hamstring in the first quarter, only plays 18% of the snaps. What a bummer. Then Xavier Woods, he leaves with an injury after playing 13% of the snaps. Then Mike Brown, who would have been the next safety, got hurt on special teams. He couldn't play. So a gentleman by the name of Kendall Brooks. I know a lot of IDP names. That one I didn't know what college he went to, and I was too lazy to go look it up. He ended up playing 76% of the snaps. Now, with the Titans out of the playoff chase, obviously, believe it or not, they have been eliminated from the playoffs if you weren't aware. But they put Kevin Winston Jr., Xavier Woods, and Mike Brown on injured reserve today on Tuesday. They signed to the active roster Eric Hallett, who just played 76% of the snaps because of the Detroit Lions beat up secondary. They signed him from the Lions practice squad. Remember, the Lions had elevated him from the practice squad for that game. So he was eligible to be signed to 53, and Tennessee did that. They also signed Sanusi Kane from the Baltimore Ravens practice squad as well. So they're going to have Hooker, Brooks, Hallett, and Kane as their safeties for this coming week. Shawn, are you playing any of these guys?
James Williams. I assume Brooks is the best option out of those guys, but that's pure speculation. Don't take it to the bank. Look elsewhere this week. This is going to be a mess. I know Hallett had a good game for Detroit. That doesn't mean he's going to have a good game for Tennessee. Although the tackle opportunities are there, I don't know who's going to get them uh, this late in the playoffs and everything. No, go find somebody for sure on the field in a box role and play them. Stay away from these guys.
Yeah. Stay away, stay away, stay away. Now, in the deepest of leagues, I might try and stash Eric Hallett for week 17 if he ends up getting, about 100% of the snaps and he produces. But just as an FYI, food for thought for folks. But don't play him this week, please. At cornerbacks, Jalen Armour Davis was inactive again, so that meant Darrell Baker and Marcus Harris were your outside cornerbacks. Kyer Elam, the former first-round pick for the Buffalo Bills, who got traded to the Cowboys because the Bills found a sucker to get at least a late-round draft pick for him, and that sucker being Jerry Jones. Then the Cowboys just recently released him, and so Tennessee picked him up. So if you're wondering where Kyer Elam, the number one pick from several years ago, is, that's where he ended up. All right. I just like to throw in a little interesting trivia here and there. All right, let's move to the Denver Broncos in the AFC West. They played 66 snaps versus the Packers. 66 is a great number because that's June 6th, which is my birthday. So just thought I'd mention that if you want to send cards on June 6th. All right, Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito both at 68%. Zach Allen was at 76%. The big news, though, was that linebacker where Drake Greenlaw played a season high of snaps at 77%. That was a season high for him. Also got an interception as part of that. Justin Sterner played 0% of snaps on defense before he left the game with an injury. Shawn, if you lost a linebacker, or if you're concerned about Robert Spillane, for example, you playing Drake Greenlaw over Robert Spillane this week?
Yeah, I'm playing so many people over Robert Spillane this week. I'm not here for coaching games. Spillane is on my bench until he's proven he's playing a full time role again.
Okay. You playing Greenlaw over James Williams? Question mark.
Probably not. I will probably start James Williams over Dre Greenlaw, but
Because you think Williams will get 100%.
I think he'll be on the field more. I think he'll have more tackle opportunities. That's the only real reason. Talent wise, you're taking Greenlaw, but yeah, I just think the opportunities are going to be more for Williams. But it's not like one's here, one's way down here. It's fairly close.
Okay. All right. At safety, the other big news for the Broncos, Brandon Jones left the game with an injury after 52% of the snaps, and he was placed on IR on Monday, December 15th. He was replaced by PJ Locke. So that was true for this game. But as we look forward to the next game, I'm going to speculate that if not week 16, which is the next game, maybe even week 17, Jade Barron is your other starting safety next to Talanoa Hufanga. I know PJ Locke played that role last year to a certain degree, but there was a reason they went out and signed Hufanga because they weren't satisfied with PJ Locke. They liked him more for special teams. Shawn, do you agree that we might see more Barron over PJ Locke in these next 2 weeks?
We could, mostly because the Broncos have their role locked up. Their division is safe. They are still fighting for the number one seed, but they are in control. So once everything's locked up, yeah, I think we could see them rest starters, put in Barrett a little more just to see what he's got here and there.
Of course, Barron was a first round pick out of Texas, and he did play at Texas. He played safety, slot, and outside cornerback.
Yeah,
That's why, with that draft pedigree and as they're ramping up for the playoffs, I could see it happening. Now, if he plays more of the Jones role, Jones was playing a little bit more deep than Hufanga was.
Mhm.
So just something to keep in mind. But Barron, if you're getting desperate and deep, something to watch. Okay, let's move to the Chiefs. Shawn, who played 66 snaps versus the Chargers. And I hit the desk purposely a couple of times for Mr. McMillan, who follows us and reminds me that I hit the desk too often. So I try not to do it, but every once in a while I want to say hello to him because he's been a loyal follower. Okay, Ashton Gelate and Charles Omena, who tied for number 2 on edge snaps at 50% behind Karlaftis. This is 79%. What was really interesting is in a make or break game, Chris Jones, who had been playing 80+% of the snaps, every single week was all the way down to 64%. And this was not a blowout game. That was really interesting that that happened. And then after the game, he didn't realize that they had actually been eliminated from the playoffs. Kind of makes you wonder how tuned in he really is. But the Chiefs have a great matchup against the Titans this coming week. With Minshew being the quarterback, with Mahomes being out, with them being out of the playoffs, but the Chiefs having this great matchup against the Titans, and Chris Jones, who has quite a salary. Would you take a chance in defensive tackle required leagues on Chris Jones?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not, huh?
No, he's had. This was a good matchup this past week against the Chargers. That offensive line. This was a letdown by the Chiefs defensively to not. Well, I'll say that from the sacks that we didn't get it from Karlaftis. Chris Jones didn't go off or anything. These guys should have had 2 or 3 apiece. With this matchup this past week. Titans have been playing better actually. I still expect the Chiefs to get some sacks. I don't know who's going to get them. But for Chris Jones not to know it was make or break, for him to be just his season in general has not been good. Uh, I don't know what his metrics are. They're probably better than what his stats are showing, but for what he's shown me, no, I won't know Chris Jones.
Okay, don't hold back on your opinion on that one, buddy.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, nothing personal.
Nick Bolton played 91% of the snaps. Part of the reason was because he left the game. He was able to return, but, out of the playoff hunt, got a little bit of an injury. Do they throw him out there? Something to watch, folks. We're unfortunately, while it's fantasy football playoffs for us, for a lot of these teams that are out of the playoff hunt, we talked about the Titans earlier and what they did at the safety position. These guys might miss a game or two. They go into an IR, or they're not going to play them. They're going to make them inactive. You've got to make sure you have contingency plans. Drew Tranquil played 94% of the snaps, had one of his better games of the year. One disappointing thing, Chamari Connor was up to 33% of his snaps deep, which was, I didn't double check, but was one of the higher numbers, if not the highest for the year. Disappointing usage with Trent McDuffie inactive with injury. What was interesting, Mike Edwards was down at 9%, Jaden Hicks was down at 8%. Kevin Knowles, another name that not a lot of people know, he became the third cornerback. He played 44% of the snaps, and 90% of those were in the slot. So all of a sudden, Chamari Connor might not be trustworthy or as trustworthy as he's been in the past with that kind of utilization where the Chiefs are. And are they going to give some of these younger guys some playing time? Something we will have to watch. Let's move to the Raiders now, who played a very nice 69 snaps against the Eagles in quite the blowout game for sure. Wow. Yeah, just remember, if the Raiders are playing more on defense, that means their offense isn't playing much, and the defense playing against the Raiders, as we talked about earlier, don't get as many snaps. Keep that in mind. 69 snaps was one of their better games, quite frankly.
Yeah, it really was. They were doing 80s.
Yeah, we've seen them in the 80s multiple times, in the high 70s. So Max Crosby, he's amazing. Continues to play so freaking hard despite the fact how bad that team is. I mean, they really suck. And he played 100% of the snaps. Charles Snowden was up to season high 68% for those Charles Snowden followers out there, the two of them maybe. Devin White, 100% of the snaps, 16 tackles in what was supposed to be a bad matchup for linebackers. Devin White continues to rack up the sack. Now, there is a video clip of Max Crosby getting on Devin White on a touchdown run where Devin White kind of screwed up, but I think that was more of Crosby's frustration in general than anything. Shawn, you look like you're about to comment on that.
Yeah, I've seen that video as well. There's speculation it was actually you could point a lot of fingers on that video if you really look at it. Darian Porter, I don't know what the hell he was doing, but he was not going after the ball either. It's got to be frustrating this many years for him to play as hard as he does. And we called out Sunday, just because it was a bad matchup. The bad matchup has been because the Eagles are playing better teams. Well, this was a bad team, a very bad team. And so when the Eagles got the lead, they were able to just kind of grind it out, which gave a lot more tackle opportunities. So even though this was a bad matchup, statistically for linebackers, with the Raiders being as bad as they are, it left it open for Devin White to go have a really good game. So sneaky stuff like that was there was a lot of people that actually benched Devin White this week that I see.
Yeah. And if they watched our Start Sit show, which by the way, 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central, this coming Sunday, we'll be here to answer your Start Sit questions. We had a couple, and we told people to play Devin White. So we talked earlier and joked a little bit earlier in the show about playing your studs and all. You don't necessarily think about Devin White as a stud because of the past couple of years, but if you look at him this year, top 5 in tackles at linebacker, he's been a stud from a scoring perspective and all, even on a bad team like this. You don't sit your studs. You don't sit like a Devin White who's playing so freaking well.
And this goes back to our shows in the offseason, before the season kicked off, where we were talking about defensive coordinators, Patrick Graham, just what he has done in the past, regardless of who his players were. The linebackers always produce that middle. Whoever had that green dot, that 100% roll, always has a fantastic year. And this same again this year. It just happened to be Devin White.
Exactly. Jeremy Chin was listed as questionable this week, just like the previous week. And in both cases, he played 100% of the snaps the last 2 weeks. Unfortunately, this was a really down game for him this week. I know he disappointed a lot of IDP players. He was well positioned. The Eagles ended up running the ball a hell of a lot late in the game as well. Chin was on the snap for every field. He just was on the field for every snap. Sorry, I started talking way too fast. Talking without thinking, that's never a good thing. But just a really bad game for him. Shawn, you playing him this coming week?
Yeah, unless I just have a way better option. But he's been really good throughout the whole season, so it's easy to forgive one down game every now and then. I just prefer not to be in the playoffs.
In the playoffs, exactly right. Okay, let's go to the Chargers here, who played only 61 snaps against the Chiefs. Khalil Mack, 82%. Tuli Peloto, 80%. He had two more sacks, having a fantastic year. So after I was dogging him earlier in the year, because after 5 or 6 games, I believe he had 4 sacks, which all came in one game. All of a sudden, he's really turned it on. So I'll give credit where credit's due, and I was wrong. Okay. Odafe Owe, though, is up to 54%, and he got two more sacks. Bud Dupree was all the way down to 10%. So they took snaps away from Dupree in this all important game, gave him to Owe. He has, I believe, 7 sacks on the year now. Every single one of them since he was traded to the Chargers at midseason. In desperate deep leagues, are you going to take a chance on Owe in the fantasy football playoffs the way he's been playing?
He's on my list right now. In a couple of what I was looking at waivers before we started recording, and he's somebody I'm really considering. But this is leagues where we're at defensive ends 3 to 4, and these are deep leagues. So yeah, in these type of leagues, he's definitely an option with his production that he's had right now. I know it's a rotation, but guy keeps putting up stats.
Yep.
And if I got enough, if my other starters are doing well enough that I can kind of go for a guy like this who has such a higher ceiling, can be a little more sack or bust because my other guys are very consistent, very productive. I'll take that shot on that position.
All right, let's go to linebackers where Deion Henley did play 100%, in case you were wondering, folks.
Hmm.
Thank goodness he got an interception. But if we did an award show at the end of the year, he would be up there for biggest disappointment, least valuable, whatever you want to call it. Denzel,
James Williams or Dayon Henley?
oh, it's got to be Henley for sure, because he got drafted much higher than James Williams did. Perryman and Dye had a kind of a rotation as they tended to have with Perryman on the rundowns more or longer distances. You get the idea. Troy Dye 33%, Perryman 51%. Derwin James played 100%. Finally had a very big game. So Derwin James did come through, and I have to admit on Sunday there's a couple of people because James hadn't been really giving us that kind of production. We did recommend Chin over James. Apologies, folks, but this was really an outlier game for James compared to what he's been delivering. Now, Elijah Moden was inactive with injury. RJ Mickens left with an injury after 21% of the snaps. Tony Jefferson, 71% of the snaps before he left with an ejection.
Yeah, he was asked to leave.
He was asked to leave in this particular
Yeah,
case as opposed to
very
me.
sternly. It looked
Yeah,
like.
yeah, that was ugly hit that he had, and then he's starting to fight and all. All right, then in the cornerback position, Cam Hart did jump up to 90% of the snaps. No other cornerback has been above 80% as has been for several weeks in a row, but we're not chasing Cam Hart. All righty, let me just Tony Jefferson. If Moden's out and Mickens is out, and assuming Jefferson isn't suspended, Jefferson has been a productive IDP in the past. Would you trust Jefferson here in the playoffs if you need a safety? If you just lost Kevin Winston, for example, and if Molden and Mickens are out, I think I would, Shawn.
Yeah, absolutely. He he plays a hard hitting style that is, we've moved away from that, but he's old enough to still have played some of that. But yeah, he's a solid defender. In fact, I know Marcus May, I think, was another name to look out for on the Chargers defense. Who both of these guys were on there last year, and both has some productive games. So yeah, Tony Jefferson, you could do way worse than Tony Jefferson this week.
Yeah. And speaking of Marcus May, of course, as you brought up, he was signed to the practice squad today. Because Moden was out, Marcus William, the former Saint, former Raven,
Marcus Williams, yep.
he was he's also in the practice squad. He was elevated for the game this past week. So, but of course he struggled. Part of the reason he's had a hard time finding a job. So still feel good, but just note that we should watch this whole Marcus Williams and Marcus May thing. But they've been street free agents for quite a while. 32 teams out there, they finally got signed. So not losing a ton of sleep, even though they have the brand names, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, none of these guys are young either, and that's been another key factor. They're the
Exactly.
old guys.
All right, Shawn, how about we move to the NFC now? Well, let's go to the NFC East and the Dallas Cowboys, who played 55 snaps versus the Vikings. Once again, I have to repeat what I said last week because I had to counteract what I was saying the previous weeks. So much for that improved Cowboys defense, Shawn. JJ McCarthy carved him up like an electric knife going through some melted butter. I mean, or soft butter, man. I mean, it was just pretty darn bad.
Yeah, it was awful, awful. This time of year, they with the losses they had from everybody else, kind of opened the window up for them to get in the playoffs, and they laid one of the biggest studs of the week.
Yep. So it's like on, I don't know, let's make a deal. Here's door number 3. It is wide open for you. Come join the playoffs. No, we'll take the
Yeah,
whistle or whatever, the squeaky duck toy or something. Okay, all right, enough of that. Donovan Izuruku, 71% of the snaps. Once again, he's playing in the low 70s. Jadeveon Clowney was up to 51%. Dante Fowler, all the way down from the 38% range roughly to 18%. Sam Williams, 42%. So that's how the edges played out. At linebacker, Logan Wilson was actually announced as the starter, although I forgot to check, was it him on the field or Murray? Because sometimes who gets announced as the starter isn't necessarily the starter, and some of these things they show on TV. But for perspective, Kenneth Murray played 40% of the snaps. Logan Wilson played 53% of the snaps. So we're starting to see Murray trend down, Wilson trend up. Either way, you can't play either one of them as long as they're in this platoon situation, right, Shawn?
yeah. Stay away from it. Stay away.
DeMarvion Overshown, I predicted he would break the 80% mark, maybe closer to 85%, I believe it was. He actually played 93% of the snaps, which is where we say, yes, sir, giddy up. And we were comfortable putting Overshown in your lineup last week, but we're saying even stronger, get him in there, right, Shawn?
Yep. Turn him loose. It's finally time.
It is time. What a great time, too, here in the fantasy playoffs. Shamar James didn't play a single defensive snap. I did see him on special teams. Maris Lufau played 29% of the snaps. So Shamar James, it was great while it lasted. Nice to know you. Maybe next year, but that's it for this year. Quinnen Williams left the game with a concussion. So in defensive tackle required leagues, you're going to have to watch the injury report. He left after 56% of the snaps. Kenny Clark, 78%. Osa Digizua, 76%. If he had to play one of these two, Osa at least has the sack upside, I think, Shawn.
Yeah.
I think that's the one of the two that we would pick up if we were in desperate situation. And it is against the Chargers offensive line. Cowboys play the Chargers this coming week. So that could be another sneaky gamble at defensive tackle.
Yeah, I like both those calls. Yeah, the Chargers still awful O-line, and it's to the interior, like you say. That's why we're upset about Chris Jones not really doing much. So yeah, Odigizua, I'm with you. I think he's the better of the two to pick up here.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to mention for Cowboys fans that maybe didn't see this, Trayvon Diggs, there was some sort of in an interview that was kind of cryptic, which it sounds like he's healthy and ready to go, and the Cowboys are holding him back. And you almost get the feeling that they don't want to play him and risk him getting hurt and then have to pay him for next year, and that he'll be an off-season salary
Casualty, cap casualty.
That's the word, cap casualty. That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Sean. And with the money they paid Deron Bland as well, with the new contract they just gave him, you could see him being treated as the number one. And bye-bye Trayvon Diggs. So, and even Chris Collingsworth during the game actually threw some shade at Diggs about this mysterious accident that he had at his house that caused him to be out all these games. So there's something not right there, Cowboys fans. You're going to have a new cornerback, and Trayvon Diggs will be on a new team next year, sure it looks like. Let's move to the Giants, who played 61 snaps versus the Commanders. Abdul Carter, the number 3 overall pick of the New York Giants, who's been he's been slowly but surely showing more and more improvement. His pass rush win rate was improving PFF. He was getting closer and closer. Wow, what a phenomenal game. He played 80% of the snaps. Of Granted, it was against the Commanders. He had 7 tackles, a sack, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery. Granted, this was also Marcus Mariota in the Commanders, but that was a fantastic game. We've been talking about a lot of these rookies: James Pierce, Mike Green, Abdul Carter. They've all been improving as the year progresses. Fantasy football playoff time. Abdul Carter, you put him in as a number 2 defensive end edge.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
play over Jared Verse, who has done hardly anything over the last several weeks.
Yeah.
Dude,
I think you have to. I mean, because Jared Verse last year at least had the tackles. He hasn't had the tackles this year to help keep him afloat for those no sack weeks. And if Abdul Carter can go and get 7 tackles, force some fumbles, I don't have to have the sacks, but they're nice to get those too. So yeah, if he's getting the full start here across from Burns, yeah, I think you can start Carter over Verse.
Yep. Now, unfortunately, Brian Burns did not have a fantastic game for us in playoff time with playing 77% of the snaps. Dexter Lawrence was up to 77%. Didn't really do a whole lot. What I will say is you can't have a nickname like Sexy Dexy with the type of IDP production he's given us this year. So you cannot call him Sexy Dexy. His Dexter Lawrence until he proves otherwise that he's going to give us some IDP stats. Bobby Okereke played 100%. And as we called and cautioned and warned everybody of how it was going to play out, and that's absolutely how it played out, Darius Muasau was activated. He was the number 2 linebacker. It was not Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. It was not Zaire Barnes. It was Darius Muasau. And he had a fantastic game, Shawn.
I seen some Zaire Barnes in some starting lineups this weekend. So not everybody got the memo.
Listening to us, man. I tell you.
It was very, very solid comeback. Very good game for Muasau. I don't know you'll get that every week, but that was that's within the realm of possibilities.
Yeah. And if you think about that, Michael McFadden production, he plays 75 to 83% of the snaps when he was out there, and he usually was pretty efficient. That second linebacker role usually has a decent amount of tackle efficiency for the snaps that they do play. Moving to safety, Jevon Holland played 100% of the snaps. He played 57% deep. But just like the previous game, Tyler Nubin and Dane Belton once again did some rotation. Now, they were on the field together in some 3 safety stuff as well. But Nubin played 69% of the snaps only. Dane Belton only 71%. Now, when Nubin was on the field, he only played 2% deep, whereas Belton played 47% deep. Oh, Shawn, this really hurts Nubin. Even if this rotation continues with Nubin playing that much closer line of scrimmage, you're taking a chance on him and or Belton, who is, once again, very efficient from a tackling perspective on the snaps he does play.
No, I've actually dropped these guys in a couple leagues and have benched them in the others. So unfortunately, I can't play either one without an injury to the other.
Exactly. I'm with you there. Andrew Phillips did play 54% of the snaps, 82% of the slot. But I don't remember if he had a stat. Now that I think about it.
That's another guy I've dropped a while back. Which a lot of those games were just bad matchups where there just wasn't enough 11 personnel being run. And even in the games where he just got really cold this year. And I'm just not holding on to a cornerback that can't produce.
Yep. Deontay Banks, the former number 1 draft pick for the Giants, I think it was 21st overall, didn't play a single snap on defense. Just as an FYI.
Yeah.
There. Let's look to the Eagles, who, as we talked about, when you play the Raiders, here's your risk. They only played 42 snaps in this game. That's about 2.5 quarters, and it was a blowout game to boot. So you started seeing the starters, some of the key starters, come off the field in that fourth quarter as well. Now, Jalen Phillips did play 71% of those snaps. 42 times 0.71 gives you about 29, 30 snaps. That's not a whole lot to be productive. Nolan Smith, 62%. He did get I put in the notes, I just realized I said snack when it's supposed to say sack. He may have gotten a snack during the game as well, but he got a sack during the game, so that kind of saved him. Hunt was at 60%. Now, Of all the freaking people that are going to get sacks, freaking Brandon Graham on only 17% of 42 snaps gets 2 sacks.
Those should have went to Jalen Phillips, and I'm kind of upset they did not.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda, but it did
Yeah,
not, unfortunately. Jalen Carter was out, so Ojimo was 79%, Jordan Davis 67%, Byron Young 38%. Young is someone who continues to step up a little bit. He struggled out of college early on, out of Alabama, but he's starting to be a little bit more productive. I'm not playing him in the playoffs, but just something to keep an eye on for dynasty for down the road, maybe.
there was quite a few people that picked him up last week. Nobody started him. Nobody was brave enough for that, but they at least picked him up, and I see him on quite a few benches, which was
And he is
interesting.
playing the Commanders this coming Saturday. So that's something to keep in mind. So the Eagles do play on Saturday. So let's just mention that real quick. The Eagles play the Commanders because the Commanders are next as well. So they play on Saturday, as do the Packers and Bears on Saturday night, and then the Rams and Seahawks. So we're at that time of year now. You've got to set your lineups earlier and make sure that you keep your flex spots available and put some of these guys that are playing in the earlier games in the position required spots, so you have flexibility if there's some last minute injuries, last minute not active for whatever reason, that you could put other people into your flex position. So keep that in mind, everybody. All right, back to the Eagles. Zach Bowen, 93%. Nakobe Dean and Jahad Campbell totaled that 93%, but Dean played 79%. Campbell, after playing 0% the week before, played 14%. I have a feeling there was a discussion that said we got to get him a little bit snaps. It took away from Dean's snaps. Dean was still hyper efficient from a tackling perspective while he was on the field. But if there's going to be a little bit of this rotation, it does hurt Dean a little bit. Marcus Epps and Reed Blankenships were your safeties once again. Cooper DeJean played 93% of the snaps. He sat out the last few snaps because of the blowout. He played 75% of those snaps in the slot. Moving on to the Commanders. Not a ton to talk about the Commanders here. They played 68 snaps versus the Giants. A defensive tackle, Javon Kinlaw, played a very nice 69% of the snaps. Kinlaw led the defensive tackles or interior defensive linemen, whatever you want to call it. For the Commanders, Daron Payne was down to 54%. Expect Daron Payne will be on a different team next year, Shawn.
Yeah, I would think so. Back in his heyday a few years ago, him and Allen were fantastic options. You could have got them cheap at defensive tackle, and they were solid all the time. That's not the case anymore.
Yep. Wagner and Luvu both played 100% of the snaps. Jordan McGee as a third linebacker, particularly due to the matchups and all, was all the way down to 21% of the snaps. At safety, unfortunately, now we warned you not to play this guy.
He sucks.
He sucks. He's Cody Barton in disguise, just like Cody Barton, et cetera. But Will Harris and the Commanders put that's three safety rotation back in play that they had with Quan Martin and Jeremy Reeves and Darnell Savage. They released Savage. When Harris comes back, they play Harris 100% previous week. This week, Harris played 84%, Quan Martin 89%, Jeremy Reeves 41%. It's hard enough to play Will Harris at 100%, let alone 84% of the snaps. None of these safeties, Shawn, are playing, right?
I'll take a shot on Quan Martin because he has corner eligibility on Yahoo. And sometimes he does decent enough to outscore other corners, but that's the only cheat code you get out of this group. Will Harris has the same eligibility, but he sucks. Doesn't get enough stats. So no, I'm really looking elsewhere.
All right. So the only other thing with the Commanders, Mike Sanders still played basically all his snaps on the outside on 100% of the snaps. Let's move to the NFC North and the Chicago Bears, who played only 50. I guess I should say the Bears. Okay, got that. Sorry if you're a Bears fan and I'm butchering that. My apologies. Okay, they only played 56 snaps versus the Browns, but with that, there was a decent amount of folks that had some decent stats. But Just as an FYI, that's the third game in a row for the Bears that their defense has only played in mid 50s from a snap count perspective. We'd prefer them be in the mid 60s. That is obviously impacting some of their IDP stats, and that's due to the run game and that ball control that they're doing. And over the last 4 weeks, they're one of the top three running teams in the league. So that's going to hurt their defense. So once again, we talked about it with some of these blowout games against the Raiders and whoever might be playing the Raiders. The Bears defense, another thing to keep in mind if you're weighing options of who to play. Austin Booker, 82% of the snaps, and he did have 2 sacks. We'll still see him more as a volume-based player, not necessarily as a stud per se, but he did get 2 sacks against the Browns and Shador. Montez Sweat did play 79% of the snaps. That hot sack streak that he had going for a while has kind of fallen off. I meant to go back and check how many, what's happened last several games, Shawn. He only
One
enabled one tackle.
one solo tackle, I think 2 quarterback hits, but 1 sack over the last 3 games, and I think 3 quarterback hits. So he is definitely cooling off at the wrong time because he was becoming start him every week. He's getting a sack, getting hits, and now we're right here at the playoffs. He seems to be cooling down, so be wary of that.
Now, the Bears did a little bit of another switcheroo on us this week as well. Whereas DeMarco Jackson in the previous week had played 100% of the snaps and wore the green dot, and TJ Edwards came back to mid 60s from a snap count perspective and played more than number 2, the will linebacker. Those two flip flopped this week, and TJ Edwards, who was wearing the green dot until he got injured, he returned to that green dot role, played 100% of the snaps. DeMarco Jackson only played 66% of the snaps this week. He got a sack. He got an interception, which I played against him in the Kings Classic as well, which just really pissed me off that DeMarco Jackson did that, of all people, when he only had 3 assisted tackles the week before. I digress. But only 66%. And then on Noah Sewell played 5%. Amen Agbangbingba Bamingba. He didn't play any, however you say his last name. But the big news, Tremaine Edmonds on Monday, December 15th, had his 21-day practice window open. His injury wasn't deemed to be that severe, just needed a few weeks off. He could easily be activated for this week. So if you were a DeMarco Jackson player, and if you played against me and you're going to use him again, I'm laughing because he might cost you a victory, because I expect that Tremaine Edmonds will regain his role this week. Shawn, if he's active, do you expect Tremaine Edmonds to move into the role that he had before?
Yeah, if he's active, you're firing him up. He was on a fantastic roll, and it seems to be whoever is not the green dot guy is the one putting up the stats, and that was the big thing this season was TJ Edwards was taking over the green dot, which frees up Edmonds, and that's been the case for most of the year. So yeah, if he's active, fire him up. If he's not, then DeMarco Jackson is a risky deep league option.
Yeah. Remember, they played the Browns, and there was Shador Sanders, who had a really struggle of a game. So keep that in mind when you're considering playing him, who might play about 65% of the snaps if Edmonds doesn't get activated. And the Bears are playing the Packers and Jordan Love, who's been difficult to sack, not the Browns. All right, at safety, yes, Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker did play 100% of the snaps. Kyler Gordon did go to IR. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson played 96% of the snaps in that slot role. With Gardner on IR, at least the one good thing is clarity. We don't have to worry about someone taking snaps away from him. Gardner-Johnson will be playing that role. At the cornerback position, Deshaun Wright played 100% of the snaps. You had Tyreek Stevenson and Jalen Johnson, who kind of alternated at the other cornerback position, with Johnson at 39%, Stevenson at 59%. Basically, around 60 and 40, you get 100% of the snaps. You get it, okay? So will that continue? I don't know, but it was interesting that Stevenson and Johnson, now both are coming back from injuries. They rotated, and Deshaun Wright kept us 100%. But there's a chance as they get up to speed, you could have a 3-man rotation, which could be bad for Deshaun Wright, Shawn.
Yeah, I was really surprised he got the 100%. I thought for sure he would be down to Nothing actually with Gardner Johnson taking over the slot. I thought he was going straight to the bench. Yeah, I didn't. I think I started him in one league, benched him in all the others. So it wasn't a great matchup anyway. So I was already off of him. So yeah, that's very interesting. I think I'm staying away from all of them.
Quarterback rotation, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think any of them are going to play 100% this coming week.
yeah,
All
stay
right,
away. Look elsewhere.
let's move to let's move to the Detroit Lions, who played 72 snaps versus the Rams, and back to the whole thing we've been talking about. You always play your studs. Aiden Hutchinson, who had gone a couple of weeks without a sack, terrible matchup against the Rams. What does he do? He gets an interception and he gets a sack, and throw a couple of tackles in there as well. So you always play your studs, folks. We preach that, and sometimes it's hard when they've had a couple of particularly in big scoring leagues when they don't get those sacks. But we always play them, right, Shawn?
We're supposed to. Even we get guilty of overthinking it. I know we both did, and we both lost those games. So
Don't
uh,
overthink it like we did. That was terrible. Do not overthink it, folks. Play your studs. It's different if you're talking about matchups and you're talking about a low end two type of defensive end or a number three wide receiver or something like that. Then you maybe consider matchups, but play your
yeah,
studs, folks.
when we were joking around about, or we're talking about Jared Verse and Abdul Carter earlier, neither one of those guys are in the same category as Hutchinson in that elite spot just yet. So play around with those matchups. Hutchinson, we knew better. We still did it. We lost. So start Hayden Hutchinson.
Exactly. I wasn't going to publicly admit that, but since you went there, okay.
Oh, I got no problem. Dragging you
Mark,
under the bus with me.
yeah, exactly right. Marcus Davenport played 78% of the snaps. So just as an FYI, and Al Qadim Muhammad played 46% of the snaps, but he did not get 3 sacks this week as he did the previous week, as we wouldn't expect him to do. Jack Campbell, 100%. Derek Barnes continues to trickle down all the way down to 69% of the snaps. Alex Anzalone, 94%. Malcolm Rodriguez played the other 6%. Didn't see if Anzalone was banged up or whatever for a couple of snaps, why that happened, but Anzalone, expect him to be a free agent next year. And for dynasty leagues, Malcolm Rodriguez could be playing that Alex Anzalone role next year, just something to keep in mind in your deeper leagues. Brian Branch unfortunately tore his Achilles and went to IR, as you all probably know. Thomas Harper was out with a concussion, who usually plays in Kirby Joseph's role, who was out again with a knee injury. Dan Campbell said he was a potential for going on IR, though they did not put Kirby Joseph there. So you had Branch out, Harper out, Joseph out. A lot of speculation. What's going to happen with Avonte Maddox? Is he going to play the Brian Branch role? We talked about the fact that if Harper's out, most likely Maddox will play the Harper Joseph role, that deep safety role, and someone else like Eric Hallett might or DeMonte Casey might play that closer line of scrimmage Branch role. Well, as it turned out, Avonte Maddox did play that deep role. He played 100% of the snaps and played 78% of those deep. Eric Hallett was called up from the practice squad and played 76%. Daniel Thomas only played 17%. Now, as we talked about in the Tennessee section, if you missed it, go listen. If you're jumping around, go listen to the Tennessee Titans section, because the Titans signed Eric Hallett off of the Lions practice squad today. Remember, Hallett was a practice squad elevation for the week. That's why, and he wasn't on the Lions 53, so that's why Tennessee was able to sign him. So if Joseph is out, Shawn, and if Harper plays, which I expect he will be able to come back from concussion, do you think now that Maddox moves into that Brian Branch role and Thomas Harper plays that deep role, particularly with no Eric Hallett? Because I'm not trusting Daniel Thomas. I know you have a little bit more faith in him, but to me, he's more of a special teamer kind of guy.
Yeah, well, this week pretty much proved that they view him strictly as special teams and just kind of emergency rotation. That he is definitely not in line to get this spot. So this is going to be interesting. I really don't know how this is going to play out. I would think Maddox might actually stay deep, being the older veteran, and we might see Harper play more in the box role, which
The
I
only
don't
thing
know.
about Harper is we
Maddox
haven't
was
seen him play that We haven't seen Harper play that box role all year, though. That's the only thing.
That's true. And Maddox was a bit of a slot guy anyway. So yeah, maybe he scoots back up and Harper plays deep.
That is Ricky's prediction
That's
going
what
out on
you're
a
thinking.
limb.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
that's
thinking. And Maddox is going to play the more the branch role, and Harper is going to play that Joseph role. And even if Joseph and Harper are both back, I think Harper goes to the bench and Joseph plays that deeper role, and Maddox plays closer line of scrimmage. And as a reminder, Maddox has cornerback eligibility on many
mhm.
platforms. And now, granted, they played 72 snaps, a little bit more than normal, but Maddox, I believe he had 8 combined tackles in that role. So now it was the Rams who have a prolific offense, so keep that in mind. But the Lions. Quick, let me look who they play. Crud, Ricky, find it. The Lions play the Steelers. So with that 3 tight end arrangement, we might see Maddox more close to the line of scrimmage. All right, I'm going out on a limb on Maddox, and I'm going to play him in the cornerback role. Sean, you agree?
I played him this past week, even though we knew he was going to play deep, or we at least speculated pretty highly he was going to play deep. I still played him because cornerback eligibility. Very solid day. He didn't do anything to hurt me, so as long as he's in there, I'm probably going to keep him just as that slight cheat code. It's not a massive one, but it's still there.
Yeah. And adding to the Lions situation, why Maddox might get more quote, close to line of scrimmage, Meek Robertson also left the game with an injury. If he doesn't return, and he was playing some of the he was playing on the outside and would play some slot snaps as well. If he's out, they may need Maddox even more in the slot as well. So just another reason why we might have some good news on Maddox. And I am knocking on wood, i.e., my desk right at this particular moment. All right, let's move to the Green Bay Packers, Sean, who played 68 snaps versus the Broncos. Of course, the big news here, Micah Parsons tearing his ACL in the third quarter. Massive loss, Sean, for so many teams who spent a first-round pick, particularly in IDP-only leagues, on Micah Parsons.
Yeah, this is a huge blow this late in the season, playoffs. Yeah, such a bummer. Hate to see this happen. There is no direct replacement for Micah Parsons, so it doesn't matter who the backup was, who's taking the spot. You're not getting that production out of him.
Yeah. And if there's one good thing that I think will happen out of this, it is at the linebacker position. So last year when the Packers were having trouble generating a pass rush, our man Edgerrin Cooper was blitzed a hell of a lot. I expect that to happen again because you're not going to Rashawn Gary, even when Micah Parsons wasn't doing much after a good start to the year. You're not trusting Kingsley and Barry. You're not trusting Lucas Van Ness. You're not trusting Aaron Mosby or Baron Sorrell. There's one more I think I'm forgetting. So, none of those guys are elite pass rushers. They're going to have to do some blitzing, and I think that's going to help out Edgerrin Cooper significantly. So the down year he's had compared to expectations, I think he may just kick it in for the fantasy playoffs, Sean. What do you
Yeah,
think?
he's been a little hot here as of late too. 8 tackles, 11 tackles, 8 tackles, fumble recovery. So not massive numbers, but I mean that's so much better than what he was doing there for a while, where it was like 6 tackles every week. So yeah, he's picking up steam. They're going to have to step up. I like the call there where they may start blitzing him again, using him in that pass rush situations. I like that. I'm firing him up for sure.
All right, giddy up, as we like to say here, at least this week. Evan Williams at safety left the game with a knee injury after only 69% of the snaps. Zane Anderson jumped into his spot and played the other, let's call it 30% of the snaps. However, I was surprised that Javon Bullard didn't move into that role. For the second week in a row, Bullard had only 47% of the snaps. And when I say for the second week in a row, meaning limited snaps, 47% this week, only 37 the week before. Nate Hobbs, by the way, only played 14% of the snaps for the second week in a row. Do you think, Sean, Javon Bullard to move into that Evan Williams role if Evan Williams is inactive with his knee injury, or do you think it's going to be Zane Anderson?
I could see Bullard taking that second safety spot, and that's what he did last year when Evan Williams was completely out of the game. So I could see that happening. Maybe Nate Hobbs taking over a little bit in the slot. Or we could see Bullard being that safety, and then when he moves to the slot, Anderson will come in as the other safety. So kind of like Jalen Petrie does with Houston. So I could actually see that happening more than Nate Hobbs. For whatever reason, they're not playing Nate Hobbs. So
Yeah.
that might be more the case.
Yep. So with that, we're not recommending playing Bullard or Zane Anderson or Nate Hobbs, are we?
No, no, not this week. The Bears are going to look to establish that run. There's just not a lot of deep options going on. They're so banged up at wide receiver. I'm expecting a lot of two tight end sets, a lot of dink and dunk and run the ball. So I don't think
So,
it'd be a good week for Evan Williams either.
yeah, given the Bears. And now we did see, for example, though, the Eagles, when they were getting run on like crazy, Vic Fangio even abandoned that too deep to move Reed Blankenship close to the line of scrimmage, and he ended up having one of his better tackle games of the year. So that could happen. The question or problem, though, is who's going to actually be on the field? And I think
Sure.
because of that, in particular, it makes it even harder to play any of these guys.
Yep.
All right, let's move to the Vikings, Shawn. Now that we did that cliffhanger for our audience, but basically, it's stay away from the Packers backups if Evan Williams doesn't play right now. That's at least until we see how this plays out this coming week. The Vikings played 71 snaps versus the Cowboys. Andrew Van Ginkel all the way back up to 85%. Jonathan Grenard, who had been battling that shoulder injury, finally active, was having a good game, 4 combined tackles and 2 half sacks. Re-injures that shoulder. He's going to have season-ending surgery. He's going to IR. Dallas Turner had dropped all the way back down to 54%. But when we saw either Grenard or Van Ginkel out, we saw Turner playing as much as 80+% of the snaps. We've talked about him being as more of a volume-based choice, but he actually started to show improvement from a sack perspective as well. How are you feeling about playing Dallas Turner as Jonathan Grenard heads to IR, Shawn?
I'm actually really fine with starting Dallas Turner. We seen him on a streak there when he was out before, or when I think it was Van Ginkel was out there for a while with that neck issue. He had a streak of 3 or 4 games with a sack, 2 sacks, 5, 6 tackles a game. It's more of that linebacker hybrid role where it's not strictly rushing the pass; it's getting some tackles too. So I actually like it a lot. He's going to be one of my main targets this week.
All righty. Moving further down the Vikings list at linebacker, Blake Cashman, Eric Wilson basically played all the snaps. Ivan Pace played a whopping 3% of the snaps. Each week I love to call it out because there's so many Ivan Pace truthers, and I got to
I know.
convince them that he is not a thing.
It's not happening like this. It's just not.
Yes, it is not going to happen. Um, Theo Jackson, DNP, so Harrison Smith, who seemed to be all over the field against the Cowboys and seemed to be playing a lot more close to the line of scrimmage. And he and Medalist both played about 100% of the snaps. So it was interesting. Harrison Smith this week only played 43% deep. Josh Medalist, 61% deep. I believe that's the second week in a row where Medalist has played more deep and Smith has played more close to the line of scrimmage. Brian Flores continues to just piss us off with the utilization of these two guys. I hope I get our audience laughing just like I got you laughing there.
Yeah, Flores, he's something else. He's fun to watch. Just what he comes up with from week to week. I liked him. I wish he was still the Dolphins coach. That's where I'm at on that.
But he's not. But he's
What
doing
could
a
have
great
been?
job with the Vikings defense. But with that safety rotation, he's killing us with the whole Medalist Harrison Smith thing. All righty, let's move to the NFC South and let's hit the Atlanta Falcons. Shawn, do you know that Atlanta Falcons played a very nice 69 snaps versus Tampa Bay last Thursday night? James Pierce Jr. jumped up to 68%, and Jalen Walker was up to 61%. So Pierce had been in the high 50s while the edges were active. Jalen Walker was around the 50% range. Both of them got a jump up. Leonard Floyd dropped down to 51%, and Arnold Ebiketie, week before, was in the 40s, dropped all the way down to 22%. Particularly with the playoff situation, meaning not playoff situation because the Falcons are out of the playoffs. Looks like they're going to give these rookies more opportunities. James Pierce Jr., I believe that is 6 games in a row with a sack, and he had 2 sacks in what was, quote, a bad matchup. Now, this is one of these where a non-stud came up with a great outing in a bad matchup kind of game. But James Pierce, man, how you feeling about him? And would you play him over Dallas Turner, for example?
Over Dallas Turner, probably not, just because of the high tackle floor that Turner can give me. And Pierce's sack or bust, pretty much. We're only looking at 2 tackles a game over the last 6 that he's averaging. So 2 tackles and a sack, 1 to 2 quarterback hits is his average over the last 6. So Dallas Turner can give me 5, 6 tackles, sack, 2 sacks, something. So over Dallas Turner, no. But I do think if you got him, depending on who's in front of him, I'm probably starting him. I mean, that sack upside. I liked him in the preseason. We talked about this. He was my pick for defensive player or rookie of the year. I thought he would out sack Abdul Carter, which I thought circumstances would have been different by now. But he's on a roll, and he's definitely heating up. This is the time rookies take up or really kick up. We've seen it year after year, especially defensive linemen. I mean, they're really getting their legs under them. They're really cooking. And Walker, to your point, is doing really well too. So start him, but I'm not starting him over everybody.
All righty. Caden Ellis and Devon Diablo both played 100% of the snaps. Shawn, Tatum Bethune, a little bit news, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but Tatum Bethune from the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan said he is going to practice this week. And it sounds like he's going to be pretty much full. If not, even if he starts limited, he'll be full by the end of the week. That means Bethune is probably going to be your starting middle linebacker for the 49ers. Would you start Tatum Bethune over Caden Ellis? And that's why I'm bringing it up now, since we're talking about the Falcons.
Yes. Tatum Bethune was playing out of his mind from a tackle efficiency perspective. I mean, dude was getting double-digit tackles every week. Now, he wasn't giving me, a chance at a sack. And Caden Ellis did have one that was called back this past week.
Yep.
But Ellis has been so up and down. It's really been frustrating. He may be solid for the playoffs, but if I have Bethune and I know he's 100%, I'm starting that dude. He has done nothing to make me think he can't get 10 to 12 tackles.
All righty. Now, Jesse Bates played 100% of the snaps. Xavier Watts 97%. Bates only played 30% deep. Watts only played 24% deep. This against Tampa Bay, and with Mike Evans back and Godwin and McMillan and Egbuka, which is so really surprising. They continue to play very little deep. So still feel good about firing up those two, I assume, right, Shawn, with that utilization?
Yeah, Xavier Watts, he's one of them I usually set and forget at safety. Of course, they're deeper leagues, but still, yeah, he's been solid. There's been a few hiccups here and there, but yeah, I'm still firing those guys up. They don't act like they're out of the playoffs.
Now, the same league that we've been talking about that I've been very frustrated about, I picked up Mike Hughes in that game. I warned everybody. I should have put out on X that I picked up Mike Hughes, because when I do something like that, when he's had 3 great weeks in a row, he's been targeted a lot, playing 100% of snaps, been getting a lot of tackles and all. Surely he's going to have another good game. Oh, no, he's going to get hurt in the first quarter and not return. Okay, got that off my chest. But with him
His
being
replacement
out,
did solid.
yeah, his Kobe Bryant, the undrafted free agent, an undrafted free agent out of the University of Kansas, had a really good game in his absence. I could have used those points, Shawn.
Yeah.
All right. What was interesting, though, is he had A.J. Terrell was getting a penalty every other pass play on one side. And then on the other side, when Hughes went out, they had Kobe Bryant out there. They left D. Alford in the slot. D. Alford, and I think it was because of who they were playing in the Bucks and with Godwin and Egbuka and all getting a lot of snaps in the slot. Alford played 87% of the snaps in total, 83% of those in the slot, and 12% in the box. So D. Alford, since Bowman got hurt, you know, he's been the slot guy in most games, not all. Once again, matchups are important. Tampa Bay is a great one for slot cornerbacks. Had a fantastic game. All right, let's move to the Panthers. They too played a very nice 69 snaps versus the New Orleans Saints here. They lost to the Saints. The people were like trying to pump up Bryce Young and the Panthers, and I watched them play and like, how the have they won the games? Because I've said this on another broadcast. You can go back and listen if you don't believe me. How do people be on the Panthers bandwagon? They have no pass rush, but somehow they've been winning these games. But they lost to the freaking Saints again. Okay, all right.
The Panthers are what the Titans have been in the past, where they lose to teams they should beat and beat teams they should lose to. Green Bay smoked Atlanta twice, I think, or had that big blowout against Atlanta, and then lose to the Saints. You know, it's weird, and I don't know why teams are like that. It's got to come down to matchups that I haven't figured out yet. But it's fun. It's a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's fun when I can make fun of a team from the Saints. Trevin Wallace and Christian Rosenboom were both back this week. Of course, Wallace was back the game before. And as typical, Wallace played 100% of the snaps. Rosenboom was in the 70 range. He was at 71%. But of course, who has the better stats? Christian Rosenboom. Trevin Wallace, I think, had 3 assisted tackles, didn't even have 1 solo.
That's gross.
Okay, that is gross. That tells you all you need to know about Trevin Wallace. And if you were even considering playing him, please don't. Okay, Turk Wharton was active. Bobby Brown had a nice game. Maybe if you were watching the game, you saw him quite a bit, but we're not playing or chasing Bobby Brown. Derek Brown was up to 87%. Ashawn Robinson was all the way to 81% of the snaps. So that's the reason I wanted to call that out is when Ashawn Robinson tends to get a lot of snaps, he is fairly productive, though this year there's been several games where he hasn't played nearly that much. If he's playing that much, in this coming week, they play the Buccaneers. In deep leagues, a defensive tackle is someone to consider. Skirting at 62%, DJ Wanham, who had played 81% of the snaps the week before, was down to 65%. He got 2 of the 5 Panthers sacks against the Saints, but yet they still lost. If DJ Wanham gets 2 sacks and you lose, there's something wrong. Trevin Moehrig returned as Merrig, however you say his name. You can tell it's late in the year, folks. He returned to 100% of the snaps, as we said would happen, even though Lathan Ransom had that very good game the week before when Merrick was suspended for punching someone where he shouldn't punch someone. And that was Jawan Jennings that he did that too. Lathan Ransom was down to 29%, but he was nice enough to get a late hit on a quarterback scramble to give 15 more yards to the Saints for the winning field goal to occur. So thank you, Lathan Ransom. Nick Scott did play 100% for the second game in a row, Shawn. He's been putting up big tackle numbers.
I'm not chasing him.
That's what's going to be the question. Do we chase him?
No.
You're not going to, even after those 2 good games.
That's good for him. Good for him. But no, it's a no for me. Yeah, I'm not doing it.
Shaw Smith-Wade was the slot cornerback for those that were interested. Moving on to the Saints, who only had to play 57 snaps against the Panthers on defense. Carl Granderson played 58% of the snaps. And after I gave him some kudos last week, we didn't want to chase him, but I did give him a shout out. He didn't, he got 4 tackles, a couple of big 4th down stops. So I was very happy as a Saints fan. But he gave us a big fat goose egg, nada, zilch, zero, didn't do a freaking thing. Hopefully you dropped him a long time ago, as we recommended. Chase Young came up with another big sack late in the game, actually, to get the ball back for the Saints at 74%. He may not be in the top 24 in total scoring by the end of the year, but he will be on a points per game basis. I'm very confident. So I'm very proud of that call out that I had early in the year. Some good news on Pete Werner, by the way, Shawn. He broke his streak of 8 games in a row of being below 60% of the snaps. 8 games in a row.
Is he lower?
He actually got to 63% this week. So now it's
Mm.
9 weeks in a row he's played 63% or less of the snaps. You cannot trust Turner, folks. Justin Reed was out again, but the good news is the Saints did not do a safety rotation as they had done previously. So Jordan Howden came in for Justin Reed and only played 39% of the snaps deep. And he played 100%, where Giannis Sanker also played 100% of the snaps, and he was a deep safety at 58%. Shawn, if Justin Reed is out again, Jordan Howden against the Jets, and it's expected that now, once again, you watch what teams do. The Jets cut Adrian Martinez. So that would imply that at least Fields or Taylor is back, and one of those two may be the quarterback, or worst case backup when Cook sucks in the first half and the other one goes in the second half. Assuming that's the case for the Jets, would you play a Jordan Howden against the Jets this coming week?
Yeah, I think that'd be a pretty decent start, actually. I would definitely start him over Nick Scott pretty easily.
Scott.
So, yeah, that's not a bad pickup. You could do a lot worse. I think Howden will give a solid tackle baseline there with interception upside.
All righty. Let's move to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now that we're through making fun of the Panthers and me embellishing on my Saints there for a little bit. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers played 71 snaps against the Falcons in that Thursday night game. Hassan Reddick was at 72%, but boy, his teammates, I don't know what happened. I didn't go back and look, but were giving him some grief as they were walking off the field. So I'm not sure what he did there, but I think old Todd Bowles is losing his locker room. Yaya Diaby, 78% as a side note. And as a reminder, he is not related to Yaya Black of the Pittsburgh Steelers. At the linebacker position, this is where it gets interesting. Levante David did play 100%. Servasia Dennis is out with an injury. Last week, talked about the fact that Nick Jackson, undrafted free agent, was signed to the 53-man roster from the practice squad. We cautioned this could be interesting, and we thought Deion Jones would be the play if Dennis was out. Well, as it turned out, Nick Jackson was even announced as a starter, but he only played 25% of the snaps. Deion Jones played 63% of the snaps, but did a pretty good job from a tackler's perspective. I believe it was 8 combined, if I remember correctly, given he only played 63% of the snaps. But then the big news that happened is Anthony Walker, who was with Tampa Bay in the offseason but got released before the year started, a veteran who's had some good years with the Colts and the Browns. He was on the Colts practice squad. Tampa Bay re-signed him to the 53-man roster. Shawn, if Servasia is out, are they going to surprise and play Anthony Walker? Did they figure out that Nick Jackson shouldn't have been on the field, but he's great for special teams? Are they going to go with Deion Jones? What's going to happen in that number 2 linebacker spot, and are you playing any of them?
I am not playing any of them at all. Screams rotation.
Would you play him?
What? Could you repeat that?
Asia is active.
If he's active,
I'm not playing him either.
no. Hey, he hasn't been getting me the stats. Todd Bowles was very upset with his defense last week or after the game, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him shake up anybody not named Levante David or Anton Winfield. To be honest with you, but no, I don't trust it at all. We've talked about in the past where these guys were getting trashed. On social media, the announcers, everybody was really talking these linebackers down already. So to bring in Anthony Walker out of the blue, I could see him leapfrogging Deion Jones, getting 40% of the snaps. It screams a mess, screams a rotation, and I want no part of it.
All right.
I'm probably still starting David, but it's only in deep leagues.
Yep. Because obviously his age is really showing this year. Of course, Tyke Smith was out with an injury that certainly didn't help their defense. Christian Izien, who has been an IDP success in the past, but he is just a guy. He did play 100% of the snaps, had a decent game for those that took the chance and put him in there when Tyke was out. But if Tyke's back, Izien is back to the bench. And just remember, folks, he is not special. He does get IDP stats, so just keep that in mind as you're considering who you're going to start. Zion McCullum, the starting cornerback who they signed to a big contract extension earlier this season, he left the game with a hip injury after 34% of the snaps, and he was placed on IR. Now, because of that, Jacob Parrish, who was normally the slot cornerback, was playing on the outside. And then when they went to three cornerbacks, Parrish did move to the slot, and Kendall Vidar came in. Now, Benjamin Morrison was inactive. So, Shawn, my speculation, you can let me know if you disagree, is assuming Benjamin Morrison is active, we see Benjamin Morrison, Jamel Dean on the outside, and Jacob Parrish still only has his slot cornerback role.
That
However,
would
if
be
Morrison is out, then I think we still see Parrish playing on the outside and then moving into slot and three wide. Do you agree with that assessment?
yeah. I think that's a good call there.
Okay. But by the way, there was no sign of Jason Pierre-Paul as a side note for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Um, now,
Not that it would have mattered.
not that it would matter, but as mad as Todd Bowles was, and some of the frustration that was being shown to Hassan Reddick directly, I don't know what he did. Wouldn't be surprising to see Jason Pierre-Paul get activated this week or called up from the practice squad. I'm personally pretty sure they're under the practice squad, but we're still not playing Jason Pierre-Paul, folks. All right, Shawn, how about we move to the NFC West and talk about the Arizona Cardinals? And boy, what a cluster that team is.
Well, the line's been that way for years now. The D line.
Yeah, and they've invested into it, but boy, they're just getting clobbered. They played 67 snaps versus the Texans. I'll give their offense credit, but their defense, which, by the way, Jonathan Gannon was a defensive coordinator with the Eagles, and after this many years, we talked about it a few weeks back, or at least I brought it up. I can't remember if you were able to make that show or not, but Gannon's a goner. But let's talk about linebackers. Cody Simon, after only 12% of the snaps, left the game with an injury, unfortunately for those that played him and took that chance. Akeem Davis-Gaither moved back ahead of Owen Papo or whatever. He's from Auburn, so I don't care. Because they're not the real Tigers. LSU's real Tigers. Akeem Davis-Gaither took back that number 2 role, moved into the Mike role, the green dot role, whatever you want to call it, when Cody Simon went out. ADG ended up playing 100% of the snaps. Papo ended up playing 73% of the snaps. Mack Wilson is eligible to return from IR this week. Shawn, I think the answer for our listeners is if Mack Wilson is back, we play Mack Wilson, correct?
Yes.
We consider ADG in the deepest of leagues, or do you think it's going to be Papo? I think it's going to be ADG.
Yeah, I think he gets his spot back. I'm not really sure what happened that last week where he was nowhere to be found, minus a snap or so. I assume that was just something weird. We weren't meant to know, maybe disciplinary. I have no idea. But I think he does take that role back, as evident here that he got the 100% role after Simon got hurt. I'm pretty sure he's got his spot back, whatever that was.
And Ruga, I hope you are listening and paying attention to this. I'm trying to do a reverse jinx for you because Josh Sweat only played 43% of the snaps this week. Now, the week before, he only played 36%. Now, that was a blowout game, so I was thinking that was part of the reason. But this game wasn't a full blowout per se. The Cardinals offense sort of kept him in the game and all. But he and the other position players like ADG, Buda Baker, they all played 100% of the snaps. But 43% after only 36%. It feels like, man, they're only using him on obvious pass rushing situations. So Rugaru, I hope I'm putting a reverse jinx that they'll start using him more in that 50% range or so to at least get you a sack. But Shawn, you can't play Josh Sweat right now with that kind of snap count, can you?
No, he was sack or bust to begin with, similar to what James Pierce is doing now. So hopefully you've dropped Sweat and you can pick up Pierce and your score should stay about the same.
Now, Baron Browning and Jordan Birch led the edge position for the Cardinals in snap count. Sweat was tied with Zaven Collins for third with that 43%. So just for perspective and all in terms of where he seems to be sitting in the pecking order. Walter Nolan returned from injury, and as an interior defensive lineman, he played greater than 50% of the snaps. He was actually at 61%. He did get a sack. I think there's one other interior defensive lineman that got more than 50%, and they had that 5-man rotation in that spot. But Walter Nolan is someone, folks, to keep in mind for dynasty for sure, redraft next year. If he can stay healthy, let's hope he does that for the next couple of games to give us some positive vibes going into next year. Garrett Williams and Will Johnson continue to be your 100% cornerbacks. When it went to 3 wide, Denzel Burke came in as a third cornerback. Garrett Williams was your slot. At safety, both Jalen Thompson and Dadrian, which, by the way, Dadrian Taylor Dimerson's nickname apparently is Rabbit, which I just found out recently. So if you hear that, they were both out with injuries, he and Jalen Thompson. So Buda Baker played 100%. I thought it was going to be Keaton Crawford, but we didn't. We said don't pick up Keaton Crawford. We thought it was going to be him, but it was a combination of Darren Hall and Keaton Crawford that rotated in next to Buda Baker. All right, that's your Cardinals story. Let's move to the Rams. We did talk about a little bit earlier with, we've hit on Verse a couple of different times, but they only played 64 snaps. Well, I shouldn't say only. That's about average versus the Lions. Byron Young, 81% of that. Jared Verse, 73%. But as we talked about, the production still continues not to be there. Sometimes we get on a high from these guys that get off to a great start, Shawn, but sometimes it's what have you done for me lately? And sometimes we get hung up on just the last game. But in these two guys' cases, it's been multiple games where we've gotten very limited sack production. At least we got some tackles for Young, but not really much from Verse.
Yeah, that was the saving grace for Verse last year. He was getting those tackles, just not the sacks. And, it looked this year like maybe it was going to change where we're going to start getting some more of the sacks. But now he's on such a cold streak. I'm looking at benching him right now in one league that I really need to win.
Kobe Turner was up to 77% of the snaps. So now this is someone who's been the exact opposite, who's got off to a really slow start to start the year.
Really bad start.
Really turning on. I believe he's got 4 sacks in the last 4 games. And I believe 77% of the snaps, I forgot to go and double check. My apologies, but I believe that was a season high for him. And it was an important game against the Lions. And the Rams have a lot of important games coming up, including this game against the Seahawks. Are you firing up Kobe Turner, Shawn?
Yeah, so he's a guy in a 2 defensive tackle league that I've had in earlier in the year. I benched him for the longest time. I just couldn't start him. The production was not there. But I did drop him. I kept him on my bench, and the last few weeks I've been able to put him in. He's heating up. This is fantastic. This is exactly what you need this time of year. And Kobe Turner was sitting out there on a lot of waivers. So if you need a defensive tackle and he's still there, pick him up because he's getting hot at the right time.
Absolutely. Nate Landman, 100% of the snaps. Omar Spates, 59%. And the linebacker position, Cam Curl, 100%. Now, I'm about to say some words that I never thought would come out of my mouth, which is the Rams desperately need Quentin Lake to come back. It's amazing. He really is a glue to that secondary. He is eligible to come back, but with the short week in the Seahawks game on Thursday night, I don't see him playing. But here in Week 16, but there's a possibility that in Week 17 in fantasy football playoff finals, Quentin Lake could be activated. And if he is, Shawn, I'm putting him into a lineup.
If he is, from some of the last articles I read yesterday, they're really not expecting him back until the actual NFL playoffs.
Oh, okay. I saw a different one, so that's good to know. Okay.
Well, I mean, the possibility is there. He can come back at any time right now, once designated to return or activated. But the speculation then was it was a bit of a long shot for him to come back before the end of the regular season.
Okay. Josh Wallace and Cam Kinchins both only played 75% of the snaps. Jalen McCullough was at 64%. Wallace ended up being the primary slot. But like I said, he's not playing like a Quentin Lake. They really need Quentin Lake back for the playoffs. That will really help their defense. By the way, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown just caught another pass against that secondary, and Jamison Williams as well. All right, and once again, no cornerback played more than 82% of the snaps for the Rams. The 49ers, back to defenses and who the offenses are playing. They only had to play 53 snaps versus the Tennessee Titans. Once again, that's a little bit over 3.25. That's about 3.25 of a game, maybe kind of thing, a typical game. As I talked about earlier, Tatum Bethune, who was out this week again, is expected to practice per Kyle Shanahan. He said that on Monday, December 15th. If he's playing, we're putting him in if he's active, folks. Eric Kendricks hurt his calf, so he wasn't elevated this past week. We're going to watch practice reports this week and see. There's a little bit of a risk, and I'm still worried more about D. Winters than I am Tatum Bethune if Eric Kendricks gets elevated from the practice squad this week. Curtis Robinson, and I'll come back and ask you a question in a second on that. If Bethune is active, we're certainly not playing Curtis Robinson. In fact, you can drop Curtis Robinson. Are you as worried as I am on Kendricks? Because I think we have a different perspective on this and his potential impact to D. Winters, or even to Tatum Bethune. I don't think you're worried about Bethune, but are you worried about Winters?
I'm not worried about either one, actually. I think these guys have done solid enough as a tandem throughout the year. I think Kendricks was more of a depth, like for the playoffs, in case they suffer another injury. Because after seeing Curtis Robinson in there, I think they were like, we got to get somebody else. And had he not gotten hurt himself, and at his age, and have to learn the playbook and everything, getting up to speed, I think we would have seen him this week, at least partially rotating with Curtis Robinson. But I do think Winters is safe, and I think Tatum Bethune will actually be safe coming back as well. Now, maybe they work him in the last game or two just to get a little bit of rotation, but I'm not worried about either one.
Okay. All right, good deal. At the edge position, remember last week when we talked about the fact how Cleveland Farrell had 9 tackles and 2 sacks and all? And we did say they were going to play the Titans, but at the same time, we said we're not chasing Cleveland Farrell because he was in his 7th year and had 21 sacks total over the 7 years, and he had 2 in one game. Well, this past week showed us why you don't chase Cleveland Farrell. Keon White, by the way, was second in snap count behind Farrell. Farrell played 74%. White played 72%. Bryce Huff was actually third at 59%. Okay. Jair Brown played 51% of his snaps deep. Malik Mustafa played 57% of his snaps deep. But Mustafa way more productive than Jair Brown. Comfortable playing Mustafa. Shawn, not as comfortable on Brown?
Yeah, I'm okay with Mustafa, but he's not a must start. Yeah, Brown, very deep league desperation play where you're starting maybe 4 safeties.
All right. Upton Stout continues to be the slot cornerback. Unfortunately, this week he only blitzed 5.4% of the time. Sort of the midpoint of the last 2 weeks where a couple of weeks ago he was at, I believe, over 11%. The next week he was at 0. This week he's at about 5.5. So he's bouncing around in terms of how he blitzes and where they need him to blitz. So a lot of it depends on matchup. And against Tennessee, probably didn't need to blitz him as much in the type of play. All right, let's move to our last team here in NFC West, which is the Seattle Seahawks, who only played 60 snaps against Old Man Rivers. And I was so disappointed. I was expecting the Seahawks to get like 8 sacks against Rivers. That was certainly not the case. Now, at the edge position, I've been talking about the snap count, how I expected to play out. DeMarcus Lawrence, in non-blowout games, as expected, jumped to the top, and he was at 72%. Nwosu was second, about where expected, roughly in that 53-55% range. He was at 53. But what's surprising is Derek Hall was all the way down to 28%. I didn't see any report of injuries. And Boy Mafe was up to 52%. I expected those two to be flipped.
Yeah, Derek Hall.
I'm sorry?
Derek Hall was injured. I believe it was a hand injury.
Okay, so that explains it. I was looking. I did not see anything on that. Thank you for calling that out, Shawn, because I thought that was unusual. But we're not playing Hall or Mafe anyway. I do still like Hall for Dynasty. But DeMarcus Lawrence is your first one. Nwosu is your second one. Nwosu in the deepest of leagues. At linebacker, Ernest Jones, 100%. Unfortunately, Drake Thomas was all the way down to 57%. And in case you're wondering, Tyrese Knight did play 0%. Nick Imanwari or Imanwari, depending on what you prefer, played 100% of the snaps. That dude is a stud, dude. Holy cow.
Yeah, that's what we were excited about during the offseason, around the draft. Or like, this is like the top safety. Get him on your teams. Stalled a bit, some injuries there at the beginning of the year. And then because of other injuries, he's really been allowed to take off, and he's got a role that he is not giving up to anybody. Fire him up every week.
Yeah, a quick lessons learned for next year that we need to keep in mind. A lot of these rookies here, and it's true for a lot of the offensive rookies as well, particularly the non-running backs. They start the year slow, and then as the year progresses, they get their feet more under them, and the coaches trust them more, and they understand the playbook better, and then they start getting them more playing time and all. So I think for drafts next year, particularly like for redrafts kind of thing, let other people draft the rookies, and then when they drop them in around week 6, week 7, and when some of the buys start, whatever, grab them and stash them, and then have them for the stretch run. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this year that I need to remember for next year. I probably need to write that down.
Yeah, we're impatient, just as people in general, especially when it comes to, well, in his case, defensive back. So we're even less patient with those guys. Uh, so the way he profiled in the landing spot and everything, we should have treated him like we did Overshown. We knew we weren't going to have Overshown for the first 3 quarters of the season, or 2/3, whatever. And we should have done the same thing with some of these rookies. Had them on our team, but strictly as a stash, and kind of wait and see, and not be so impatient with them.
Exactly. So Julian Love returned. This is his second week from return from IR. He still only played 82% of the snaps. Tai Okada or Okada or Hakuna Matata Okada. Um, no worries. Come on, man. That was supposed to be funny. You didn't laugh.
I was reading.
Okay. Well, hopefully this coming week in this big game against the Rams on Thursday night, we see Julian Love all the way back to 100% and all. Shawn, are you going to take the chance and play Julian Love in the second week of the playoffs?
Not if I have a solid option. If I really need Julian Love to be Julian Love, then I'll start him out of necessity. But if I have somebody else that I can put in there that I know is going to play 100% and has a decent matchup and gives me a good solid tackle floor, I'll probably start them over Love
We
until I
still
can see
love
him.
Julian Love.
Yeah, but I want to see it.
Yep. Exactly, particularly during playoff week. And last thing I'll mention on the Seattle Seahawks, Devin Witherspoon played 100% of the snaps, only 55% on the outside, which is fantastic, 45% close to the line of scrimmage, slot box on the defensive line. So that's how we like Witherspoon being used. There's a couple of weeks earlier where that didn't happen. He's returned to that role. We see Imanwari playing a little bit more, taking, like, for example, snaps away from Drake Thomas as an example, freeing up Witherspoon a little bit more in the slot and closer line of scrimmage. So good news for Devin Witherspoon, right, Shawn?
Yes. His production is really kicked up.
All righty. So we're over 2 hours, Shawn, so we're going to go through the waiver wires. And we spent a lot of time purposely talking about a lot of the players we're going to go through here. So we're not going to elaborate on them here. It's going to be pretty much a list. And if you want to hear anything about those particular players, go back and listen to the recording for that particular team if you've been jumping around, so you can get the scoop. All right. So remember, what we're trying to do here is major playing time shift, injuries impact, possibly a multi-week productivity thing. And boy, be sure and go back and listen. Got to tell you that. And last but not least, be sure you have a drop. That's the other thing. Just because we put them on a list, if you don't have a good person, if you don't have a dud to drop, I should say a good person, a good choice of who to drop, don't pick some of these guys up. Now, let's start with linebackers. I did put Tatum Bethune on here in case some people got impatient or needed the bench space and dropped him. So expect him back, pick him up. You have Shaq Thompson, if no Terrell Bernard, DeMarvion Overshown, Jack Gibbons and Christian Ellis, if no Robert Spillane, Henry To'oTo'o, Akeem Davis-Gaither, particularly if Mac Wilson is not activated. If Mac Wilson is activated, ADG might be a tidbit lower on this list. Darius Muasau, Trenton Simpson, James Williams if Cedric Gray is out. And then you get into riskier other folks like Owen Popo. I wouldn't take a chance there. The whole Tampa Bay linebacker situation we talked about, et cetera. So those are your linebackers. Let's go to the defensive line. We're really focused on the defensive ends. James Pierce, Dallas Turner, which I think you might have them in opposite order, Shawn, but they're both, I would, in hindsight, I think I'd put Turner over Pierce. So let's go Turner, Pierce, Hunt, Nick Herbig in particularly big play scoring. Then you get to Mike Green. I'd go Odafe Owe, Donovan Izuruku, Chop Robinson, Jalen Walker, and then if you need a couple of volume plays, let's go with Austin Booker and Miles Murphy. At the defensive back position, Shawn, by the way, did you get the timestamp on this? Okay, cool. At the defensive back position, Malachi Moore, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Christian Izien if Tyke Smith is out, Avonte Maddox, but that's a risky one. Be sure and listen to our Detroit discussion. Jordan Howden if Justin Reed is out. Dane Belton, although he's risky due to the platoon situation. Tony Jefferson, particularly if Elijah Moden and R.J. Mixons are out and Jefferson is not suspended. Jordan Poyer, but remember, he is only in the 80-ish% snap count. Ifeatu Melifonwu, if Minkah Fitzpatrick is out, which we expect, but Melifonwu's way down the list. Eric Murray, who is just a guy. Eric Hallett, who the Tennessee Titans signed today, he would be more of a stash play. We talked about the Packers safety and Zane Anderson and or Javon Bullard if Evan Williams is out, but that could be very, very risky, and that's why they're further down the list. Don't know how it's going to shake out. Go listen to the Green Bay discussion. P.J. Locke in Brandon Jones' stead. He's going to be primarily even more of a deep safety. Hufanga will probably play more closer to the line of scrimmage, and there's still a chance we see Jahdae Barron get some of those snaps. That's why he's way down the list. Dean Clark. We're way down the list now if Tony Adams is out. And I think that wraps it up. Kendall Brooks. But once again, that could be Eric Hallett or Sanusi Kane, who they signed off the practice squads. Go listen to Tennessee once again. So I don't know if we're playing any of those guys as well, but that's on the Tennessee side of things. Shawn, anything you want to call out that I might have forgotten to mention related to any of these folks that we just went through that maybe we didn't hit on earlier?
No, I think we got all these covered back on their respective teams.
All right, good deal. And with that, folks, that brings a wrap to the show. Remember, we will be here Sunday morning to help you with our weekly live start sit show at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central. And Shawn, you're proud of me that I'm starting to say start sit much faster without twisting my tongue and almost saying a bad word. All right, so get your questions in early. We went 20 minutes past. We will not be able to do that this weekend with the Christmas holidays and visitors and so forth. So get your questions in early. If you want your question answered, use the super chat and use it early because we will spend more time earlier in the conversation answering those super chat questions and doing a detailed discussion on them. If you come in at 10:50 and ask just a question without a super chat, chances are it won't get answered, folks. I'm being real transparent on that up front. Okay, if you like this show and hopefully you had a little fun with some of the laughs we had, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, please, and subscribe to the channel. We'll be watching for comments and questions and all. Remember, we are getting to holiday season. So we won't maybe be able to check it quite as often, but we will be doing our best to check them, particularly before the Thursday night game. Give me a follow at RickyRod66 and Shawn at Shawn8386 on X. And with that, we'll see you at the Start Sit show on Sunday morning. We will be back here next week to recap week 16 and look forward towards week 17 and beyond. So on behalf of my partner and friend, Shawn T here, this is Ricky Roderick wishing you, your family, and your friends great health and happiness. Be kind to one another. And we're out of here, and we will catch you next time.